Go ahead, Don. Sorry about that.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this Manhattan Community Board 11 Public Safety and Transportation Committee meeting. It is December 12th, 2024, and we will go over some of the intro ground rules before we get on to the actual meeting. So just to reiterate for everybody who's on the line or in the room, no one may speak until granted the floor. For CB11 members, if you have questions about board business or you wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and then wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participants icon. You will find the raise hand function there. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. For members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized.
Okay. Yes, Don. So if you'd like, I can go ahead and do a roll call, and if we have
Sure.
quorum, yes, we can commence. If not, then I'll be going to recess.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Lee.
No problem. Okay, members, so just as a reminder, there are yes, 11 members and 6 are needed for quorum for this committee. Jose Altamirano. Carlos Diaz. Present. Pascal Hano. Present. Wanda Hopkins.
Present.
Thank you. Christina Johnson.
Present.
Jewel Jones. Jewel, I know that you're online. Maybe you're muted. We can circle back if you need. Okay, we'll circle back. Sage Mason. Claudia Perez. Valerie Ponte. Don Sanders.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Wiltshire Clement.
I am here, but I am on my way.
And Jewel, do you want to confirm that you're present with us? Are you able to do that?
I'm sorry, yeah, I was having a problem, but can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, yes, I'm here, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't able to hear you before. Thank
No
you.
worries. Okay, so we have 7 present and we can move. Oh, I see Sage is here. So Sage, I'm promoting you to panelist. 1 second.
I was just about to say Sage is on, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like 5 minutes away. I just want to be put in the same bucket as Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Sage. But we have quorum anyways, so we're good to go.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Khalid. So we're going to call this meeting to order at 6:38 p.m. And the first thing we'll do is adopt the December 2024 agenda, which was provided by Khalid. We made a little change in the order. And if there are no objections to the December agenda, then we will consider the agenda for today adopted. Hearing nothing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I asked Xavier in November to excuse me because I was going to the Summer Uno's conference. And
Oh,
it's the same time that this committee met. And I missed the other 2 because I was in Puerto Rico for about almost 3 weeks. So I asked to be excused, but it doesn't show on record that I was excused, but it shows that I'm absent.
oh, okay. So before we get to that, is everybody okay with today's agenda, which is just to go over today's agenda should say December 12th on top of it? Are you okay with today's agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to adopt today's December 2024 agenda and going on to the November 2024 minutes. I understand, Mr. Diaz, that you would like the record to be corrected to show an excused absence for the last meeting as you were doing very important liaisoning. for the legislative work that happens in New York State. Khalid, what is the process for amending that?
I can just make the edit and, once, like, I'm in it right now, so I'll just put
Okay.
this under excused, and that'll be that.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair.
Thanks for bringing that up, and thank you for representing us in Somos. So now that we've adopted today's agenda, Khalid, would you open that up so we can take a peek?
Yes, hold on one second, let me see if I can just pull it really quick.
I think I don't know if there's announcements first or there's the presentation first.
You can just go into the new slides. I thought you meant reviewing the whole agenda. My apologies here. You can go into announcements here.
Okay, okay. So this is something that everybody on the committee should learn about. It's a little controversial. On November 19th, the Central Park Conservancy in partnership, apologies. Okay, thank you, Andrew. On November 19th, the Central Park Conservancy in partnership with New York City Parks and New York City Department of Transportation released its Central Park Drive Safety and Circulation Study. The report outlines 14 community-informed recommendations to improve safety and mobility on the drives in Central Park. The planned changes in the medium term will include exploring a protected below-grade bike lane on the 86th Street Transverse Road and other transverse roads, replacing outdated vehicular traffic signals with more effective signals aimed at explicitly at biker and pedestrians, and working with city agencies to improve bike infrastructure on all streets surrounding the park. This is an announcement that has some pros and cons. Khalid, would we discuss this in new business? Because right now it's
Sure.
just an announcement, huh?
Yes, this is in announcements, yes. If
Okay,
you'd like to-
yeah, so I know some of the cons, and I know that folks here probably have some pros, so maybe we'll look at whether there's time under new business to talk about this a little bit. But for now, it's an announcement that we hope everybody will take a close look at the proposal and think about the demographics of our community, our specific community. I don't think I received this as an email like 2 or 3 times. I don't know. I don't think we've been asked to opine as a community board, right?
No, not formally, but
Okay.
when the study was being conducted, we were asked to help share that with our constituency, so we did do that at the very
Oh,
minimum.
yeah, yes, thank you. Okay, so that announcement made, could we, is there any additional announcements?
Yes.
I have an announcement.
Oh,
Back in for,
oh, wait, Carlos, so we have 2 more, and then once we finish those, then we go into, yeah.
Really important as we move forward with congestion relief zone tolling. The MTA is hosting 8 public webinars in December to explain why New York needs congestion pricing, how the congestion relief zone works, and what the toll rates are, who is entitled to discounts and exemptions, and other things people need to know before tolling begins on Sunday, January 5th. The sessions will feature a brief presentation followed by Q&A. Khalid, did we send out links for that, or should we, is there a link that people should go to find out the times of the webinars and sign up for them? I'm trying to,
Yeah, so in our weekly newsletter, we have the
Uh-huh.
congestion zone section lower at the end.
okay, so
And
people,
we provide a link to sorry, we just have double feedback right now.
okay,
Right, so we have the congestion zone information in our weekly newsletter, Dom, and yeah, with the link to the registration for the meetings and so forth, yes.
that's great. So I don't know if that's something that everyone attending today has access to. If not, I guess put it in the chat if you need that link and you don't have access to it. Was there one more announcement?
And another one here, and then Carlos would like to give an announcement after this.
Sure.
yeah,
Don,
Yes,
Hi, I am here and I appreciate you taking over
thank
while in my
you.
absence. And so
All
I will
right.
let you take it easy for now, but listen, and I appreciate you so much.
Sure.
Our
So why
next-
don't I hand off this last announcement to you, or this second to last announcement?
I think, are we on C?
We're under announcements, is it C on the?
We're on C, right?
Sergeant,
Okay,
Sergeant Howell?
Yes.
right. And that, Sergeant Tiffany Howell was our keynote speaker for our second Safety Awareness Conference, and I hope that everyone remembers all the things that she does. She's with Collaborative Policing. And she sent out an invitation for us, for us and all, for this Saturday, December the 14th at 4:30 p.m. at 216 Fort Washington Avenue for the grand opening of a state-of-the-art year-round baseball center. It was previously a basketball court in the Police Athletics League building, and now it has become a major league quality center, and it will be available for free use by all children between the ages of 11 and 18. And this is with the Saturday Nights program. Remember, that's what she is highlighting. And it's open from 5 to 9 p.m. And I hope that we all can make it. This is part of our continuing effort to provide, to extend our conference throughout the year for collaborative policing, so that people are off the street and doing something positive. Okay. So I don't think we need any explanation on that. We can go into our informational updates. City agency. Oh, my apology. Go ahead.
We have time, there was a letter sent out to the chairman, and also to the chair of this committee regarding the East Harlem Council of Human Services. I'm not gonna read the letter, but the letter, if you have the letter in front of you, it's basically, we had a bus stop on 122nd Street, 122nd, 121st Street, on Third Avenue, was moved about 3-4 years ago. It was never put back. Is now located on 120th Street. The elderly from Borinque Health Center, as well as the people at Taino Towers, especially the elderly that are handicapped, has access to the bus man, but they gotta walk 2 additional blocks to get them out into their home, and an additional block to get to Borinque Health Center. So we want to discuss that if we have any time. If we don't have any time, I'd like that to be part of the agenda for forthcoming.
Yes, I did receive that. I read that, and I think we had objected to that. When it was said that it was gonna be moved, but it was moved anyway. Having it back, yes. So we'll reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any more announcements? Yes,
Jewel Jones and Kyoko Jackson both have their hand raised. Want to acknowledge you?
Joel Jones, please. We have the
Thank you so
floor.
much. I'm actually gonna put this in the chat, but thank you, everybody. One of the other hats I wear, I am the chair of Metropolitan Hospital's Community Advisory Board. And this Saturday, Metropolitan Hospital Center is having their annual toy drive. All are welcome. It's Saturday, December 14th, 12 to 3, first floor, room 1D27. And I will put information in the chat, but all are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel Jones. I have the flyer. Do you want to just repeat, you okay?
Look.
The date,
Kyoko?
this Saturday.
Yes, this
between
Saturday.
12 and 3 p.m.
Yes,
at Metropolitan Hospital.
yes.
Okay? Thank you, Joel Jones. And now you said Kyoka Jackson has her hand up.
Yes.
Kyoka, you have the floor.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm happy that you guys are trying to join and go to the PAL opening of the SNL baseball field, but we have SNL that happens all over East Harlem. It would be great to see some of you come to that one as well. That is in Community Board 11. It also, we have a couple of things happening NYPD wide. Toy giveaways, so we have like 6 of them happening. There's a paranda that's happening on the 23rd, and it's gonna make several, yes,
Kyoka, you said there were SL Saturday Night Live things that are happening in Community Board 11. Can you? tell me-
absolutely, there's a ton of them.
Can you say where and when?
So Saturday Night Lights happens every Saturday from 5 to 9 in several gyms in East Harlem.
Yeah. Okay, are there any openings that are happening that are current?
We just had a few openings, so it would be great that you guys join those as well.
Okay, so when they are happening, can you please give us an invitation? Because the only reason I'm going to this one is I was invited. And so when we get the invitation, we come. Please continue on what you were saying.
No, got you. So we have several toy giveaways that are happening throughout the community. So the 2325 is doing a paranda on the 23rd, as well as Manhattan North doing the same night, doing a sleigh ride, stopping on 116th and 3rd. The 25th precinct is doing their annual toy giveaway, which we service 3,500 children on the 18th. And that will be from 4 to 9, hopefully till 9, because we try to give away everything that we have. We don't like to take anything home. And then there is another one that we might be doing in East River Plaza that is a pop-up event, but I will not give the date for that because it probably will be closer to Christmas, where we have bigger toys for young people. So I will send the flyer once we confirm that one.
Okay,
But
thank you.
NYPD is definitely coming up.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said that the NYPD is definitely coming out strong.
Oh, yes, and just because I didn't hear you say it, but on December the 20th, there is a sing-along that I think it is the 2-5 that's doing that. Christmas carol singing as well as like hot chocolate and toys, or has that moved to a different date? Do you know,
That's East
Kyoka?
River. That's East River Plaza. That's not us.
Oh, okay. I thought Officer Cosner had mentioned that last time.
Yeah, he did. You're right about that.
The date on the toy drive was the 23rd.
Toy, that's the paranda. So that's sing along as well. That's the paranda where they have it's kind of like a sleigh. And they're gonna go from the 2-3 to the 2-5 different places, with music and food and toys to give away. DJ. It's gonna be like a little parade.
Thought it was the 18th.
Okay.
What's the date on that last? What you just mentioned again?
That's the 23rd of December.
Okay. I got confused because it's the 2-3 and it's on the 23rd.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. And can you put all of those dates and events in the chat?
yes,
I'd appreciate that.
you're welcome.
Okay, and do we have anyone, oh, I know that Detective Rivera said that he was going to be busy with the events that are happening down in our area, not in our area, but in New York City. And Kyoka just represented the 2-5. Is there anyone from the PSA 5?
No members from PSA 5. Officer Cosme called earlier. She also will not be able to attend tonight for previous.
I figured as much since, yeah.
Right.
Okay, and now, may I ask if the FDNY would like to present anything?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Stokepon. I'm a firefighter with Highway 14 up the street on 124 3rd Avenue. As far as what we're doing this month, basically you guys talked about We usually hold a toy drive, for Project Greenhole. They on 118th Street between, First and Pleasant. So that will the shelter there that, we usually, do toy deal with for, kind of started late and gathering toys, but we're in the process of, reaching out to our partners, get some toys and, do that. As far as, that's all for that, what else should I go into?
What is the date for the toy giveaway?
Christmas Eve, we're trying to do.
Oh, Christmas.
Go Christmas Eve when we're now,
Thank you. And I know this is your first time here,
correct.
so basically what we ask is, to give what is happening in our neighborhood.
So
So
Yeah.
it's basically what you would want to share about,
the neighborhood, well, this, I mean, we see the worst of the neighborhood, especially with the, K2 sets up, 125th at Park, all throughout the neighborhood, all the, injection sites, there's one that's closing down on 126th Street.
They're closing down?
Yeah, it's supposed to be getting rid of it, so that's the word that we got.
Okay.
Not sure if it's a good thing or bad thing, but, either way, there's been an increase in overdose the past 2 weeks. I'm not sure if it's different batch whoever's selling it, but sad to say, like, you see those young men, out on 124th Street and like selling as if it's not a problem.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I'm not that, no, it's not flow slower. It's,
What's it back?
what is closing up
It's an injection site. I think it's a safe injection
and
site.
where exactly is
It's on
it?
126th Street. They're supposed to have address itself.
I think it's between the park and.
Parking lot, yeah.
It's called On Point.
On point, correct, yeah.
oh.
On Point, it's like one of the only 2 safe injection sites in the country, I believe.
Is it really a safe injection site? I think, I don't know. I think it's I don't need to give my opinion on it, but it's definitely, not helping people getting off. There's more people there. But
I have a question for you. Have fires increased in the last 30 days, you think, or has there been, not bushfires?
Right.
I'm not talking about.
So this time of year, we usually see an increase in fire because of the cold, and of course, we go to the public housing every day. Stuck elevators, sometimes for defective stove, and people are using their own stove at home to reduce heat. And of course, they have tons of items everywhere. That's big fire. This is a fire season for us because of the cold weather, and people have to keep walking. There's a lack of repair that goes into the housing. That's just housing, but a lot of it's going there.
So question. Compared to last year, this month, and now, has there been an increase in fires? Say from December of last year to December of this year, has there been an increase in fires?
No, it's
Relatively about the same?
relatively about the same.
Okay, and how did the bushfires
Well, yeah,
affect your, I mean, that was just
yeah, that was all hands on deck. and-
last month.
Yeah, I was there pretty much last month. Of course, with the weather season we have, with the no rain and with a lot of, the fallen leaves everywhere, of course, people smoke, drink cigarettes. Sometimes it's malicious, just to deal with it anyway, but that definitely, took out a lot of, our resources in combating those brush fires.
Thank you, Pascal.
Yeah. I have a question just about the fires. Are any of them in the recent weeks, months related to e-bikes? That's been a big thing.
So December last year to December now, it's been a huge increase. They have supposedly, what I know, there's been a bit of a safety thing that goes on. I'm not sure if the manufacturer that they used to get e-bike batteries from, they changed it, but, there's been a lot of fatal fires, fatal, it's including the close to e-bikes.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a big thing, and of course, Here, at Weiner houses, a few people take their bike up to the elevator and we had one, we said we went and swapped. Right,
In the elevator?
Yeah. Barely, so. It's, they take it home, you know, it's a state of transportation, so.
Was the person in the elevator at the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, or passed away?
No, yeah, I'm sure they're right now. They're still around, but they're burning somehow.
So it's still prevalent.
Right, yeah, e-bike fires and it's big thing. And I don't think it's going anywhere for anytime soon, because there's more e-bikes on the street than anything. Especially with the bike lanes that they do put out there, and people got hit by e-bikes recently. You go over to the car, you think you go to the sidewalk, and then. And it's especially Second Avenue, First Avenue, a lot of people going to Willis Avenue Bridge, on First Avenue. Oh, yeah. It's a highway, it's an e-bike highway, so if you're not paying attention, if an elderly is just trying to get, when you push the street to get to the sidewalk. Getting hit by an e-bike, so. If it's not a fire, it's definitely an e-bike.
And we do happen to have the numbers of, because we have the Department of Transportation here.
Right, okay.
And so.
This statistic, I don't know.
But could you,
Numbers.
are you able to get that for us? Because I know that's what he's going to ask.
I wouldn't be able to get
That is kept by the police officer or the health person who attends, who
Right.
never get injured. Okay. And that will go into the statistics.
There's actually a few bills in city council now trying to get e-bikes to be licensed.
Yes, that's what I was asking for, because okay,
Just, I guess the follow up with you, isn't there a program with DOT where people could safely bring their batteries to charge the e-bikes?
Yes.
That's rolling out, or is it
That's
already?
it's
It's a
It's a
pilot.
pilot program, and I think that it was first installed on the west side, Upper West Side.
okay, so I want to make sure that we are on one page before we go to another page. Okay. Would you like to, wait a second, I'm sorry, Sage, I said you had a question. You just.
Yeah, I have a question. I do think this is related, because if people are, bringing their
Is this a
batteries to the west
question?
side,
Wait,
then they're
wait,
not
wait,
gonna
wait,
cause
is this a
fires.
Question for DOT?
Well, I have
Or
a
for the
follow-up, which is,
FDNY?
okay, so. that's my-
related.
Yeah, I think that is related, but I'll focus for now on the FDNY question, and I would like to know more about On Point. Cause that's like national news if it's closing, and this is the first time hearing about it. So I was just wondering, like,
That might not be, I'm sorry, it
public,
might not be the news that has been put out, but you guys know. Exactly.
I don't think it's, I don't know, we respond there for an overdose and you hear workers or people there talking about it, so that's why I'm bringing it up, so I'm not sure if it's
So it's not a
Well,
official thing.
I could say a little bit about it when I get my chance.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
But that, to be honest, I don't know if that was really a beneficial thing for the community that's actually strong out and draw something. It's enabling, even though, they give out the methadone there, the same people, they sell it, I personally, I would have rather see it be a difference where people get in. And whatever they do and do it in a safe manner and also a program there to get them off of it, but it's been there for years, and it's the same clientele that's been there for years and years and years.
Oh.
It's, I don't know how, and that's my personal opinion, I'm not here to put that, but.
Well, the FDNY really are all over the place.
Right.
We're helping people out of subways, helping people out of elevators,
Right.
helping people out of.
We did have an elevator issue, and that's been rectified with, housing. More time of, keeping up with the maintenance.
Oh, that's good.
So it's so far, it's good.
Okay. Do we have any more questions, and do you want to say anything else?
Well, more just, we've been getting a serious breaking into our vehicles over there, so it's just, I guess, the increase of them wanting to get stored. where, drugs and stuff, so.
Personal vehicles or fleet vehicles?
Personal vehicles, fleet vehicles, there's barely anything in there, it's locked and secure, but the personal, vehicles is, they'll break it just to break it. To, get as much as we can get out of it. We do have a lack of, cameras in the area that can capture, what's going on.
And lighting.
Lighting, yes, definitely lighting, 124 trip between, Third and Lex, hopefully when I do build the pump, it'll be different, there'll be, a little bit of, lighting, maybe it'll go somewhere else, but it's like a hub.
I was there the other day.
Where popcorn can.
Yeah, where Pat Park was.
Yeah.
Yes, I was there the other day, this past weekend, and yeah,
Yeah, it's
it
definitely,
is dark.
and it's not safe in the morning for my kids going to school, going to the subway, that's a major packed route, to the subway on 124, especially if it's going from White houses or Tiny Towers. Walking, go home or school, work, whatever, it's definitely. Something needs to happen, but I think the main thing is getting rid of suppliers from 124 back, I think they're happening. I mean, 124 next, that's,
124th and West.
it's.
Okay, and I heard there's can you put the person on before you go?
Well, it was Dawn that had her hand raised, but I don't know if Dawn still. Dawn, your hand was raised. I don't know if you had a question or.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just a second, they're just answering the door right now.
Okay. I had a question for the fire department.
Firefighter Robinson. Oh, please return.
I can email him.
Hi, okay. So there's a question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For the FDNY.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, Don?
Thank you so much. Thank you. So when you were giving the stats on first of all, thanks so much for coming. I'm glad you're also having a toy drive, it sounds like. When you were giving the stats about overdose, are you giving us stats from the EMT side of things? Do you also, is that considered like also part of the fire department, the EMT?
No, I never gave a stats on anything.
He did not give any stats, Don. It
Oh,
was more
okay.
Going to different emergencies as a firefighter.
Okay, but not as EMT, right? Sometimes I wonder.
It's only FDNY.
Okay, sometimes I just wonder how EMT is doing. I think at some point in New York, there was like more of a connection between EMT and fire, but maybe that was a while ago. But thank you so much for coming. Sorry to hold you up.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for the FDNY?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate it, and I just want to make note that the lighting and the camera is part of our district needs that we wrote up and requested. It was one of the only ones for specific for the FDNY. So hopefully it is prioritized because it's the first.
Appreciate it.
Okay. I don't have the exact wording, but it's in there. Thank you. And so let us continue with our Department of Transportation.
Thank you,
Welcome.
thank you, thank you. Hello, everybody. Rafael Escano. Actually, I'm gonna be using my middle name, Rafael Antonio Escano.
Okay.
Pretty good.
What are you up to now?
Manhattan Borough, planner from the Office of Manhattan Borough Commissioner Office. So, I have not much to share with you guys today, but I just like to, just let you know that one of the things that I brought up the last meeting regarding 117th Street and Lexington, that there was, not only you saw it today, but it was just prepared today. So it's repaid, and I got actually I got a report from Council Member Ayala's office, and this has been going on for a couple of months since back in September when they brought it up to my attention. So that corner is there, you see it, it's repaid, it's marked. It surprised me today because I was in communication with that particular unit in charge of those kind of issues.
Mhm.
And they told me that it's going to be scheduled in the paving program. Not telling me when it was going to be done. So I just went to visit that area just to check it out. Surprisingly, it's done, beautiful. Now, there are some other items there, like the orange traffic drums and a bunch of other things that is not our responsibilities. It's Connecticut's responsibility as well as there is another entity which is called some other, but there is another entity that is responsible, and DOT is not going to remove those things. They look awful there. I'm telling you this as I'm gonna be telling the office, Councilmember Ariano's office, just in case they think that we are the responsible. We are not. So that's one thing. The other thing that I wanted to ask, going back to the previous meeting, I see that there was someone, Claudia Perez, made a motion to provide letter of opposition to DOT placing of the neighborhood loading zone at 400 East 111th Street. Is that something that is in process?
Who voted on last time?
It was voted on last month.
Yes,
That's one, Claudia Perez.
yes, and we submitted that letter already.
You submitted a letter?
Yes, but it was, but Sage had made the correction in full board that the letter is in support of the placement of that zone, a loading zone, but displeasure with DOT's approach in notifying the board about incoming loading zones.
Right.
So let me pull up the email. Yeah, I definitely sent that to you guys. Give me one second.
Yes, it was definitely sent.
In opposition?
No, in
No, it
favor.
wasn't in opposition. It was.
It was in opposition in a
Oh,
way.
because it's a letter of opposition to DOT's placing of the neighborhood loading zone of 100 and
Well,
We amended
the-
it.
The board is, the discontent is not the loading zone, but the lack of communication between DOT. Typically, when this, I know it's a citywide project that's been happening, but typically it comes to the board and there were let know of the
I'm
position,
here all the time.
but yet we didn't.
We didn't know about the
But
particular,
we sent it.
not,
I mean,
no, we were sent
Did you
with
present
the,
on it?
we were sent
Well,
the,
I usually,
But you're here all the time.
I
so
usually
you work
write.
both ways.
I usually don't present it because the letter is sent.
You should present it.
I should present it. Just to make
You're here all
sure.
the
Before
time.
the decision is made.
Yeah. You know,
That's
the main issue.
But when I send the letter, I.
What happens is that we have to present to the community.
You're right. You're right. I'm gonna do that from now on.
That would be the best.
And this is something that I'm gonna bring up tomorrow's in our staff meeting, that it's not only sending the letter, but also presenting it at the safety interpretation meeting for all the boards.
And
Yes.
I will also say that I've only seen the letter in hard copy form, so the
Right.
letter could have been sent on November 3rd. You don't receive it till November 10th, and the meeting is November 12th, right? So if we can get digital correspondence,
Yeah, I think I have,
so if anything, then it's probably going directly to Angel, like I've only seen.
right.
Right, so if maybe you can send it also to like the main,
But then
the main
yeah,
inbox.
Will, right? Yeah.
right, that would all, because I can view, I view the main office email.
Right.
So as soon as I get that
Okay.
correspondence, that would be helpful for sure.
Absolutely, I agree
Yeah.
with you.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, of course.
so that was what we were,
Right, okay, so, I'm going to look into that because we've been asked. The board planner are asked as to what the response has been from the different board.
Yes,
And, I have not gotten any opposition from this board.
right, the letters that we submitted to you, they're all in favor. The language for the minutes, technically in the recording, Claudia Perez does directly say that. But in the full board meeting, it was amended, and that's why we submitted the letter
Okay,
in support. So I'll re-forward that to you,
yes,
and so you can have it at the top of your inbox.
okay, excellent. Also, I just wanted to briefly comment about the 126th Street injection site, which the gentleman behind me brought it up. Okay, back in December
2023.
the 5th, no, December the 5th. I think, yeah, it was December the 5th, you're right, last week, we had the walkthrough, multi-agency walkthrough, organized by the mayor's office. And that was in the morning, we had different representatives from different agencies, and one of the agencies was DOT. We have already done what we were asked for back in October 2023 regarding the reordering of things around that intersection as far as the infrastructure was concerned. So we put streetlights. We removed all the things that were on Lexington, like construction material stations or storage area that were removed to 124th Street between 9th and 3rd. So that intersection was really clean. As far as DOT is concerned, we had done what is necessary in order to have that intersection look the way it looks now. Okay. Now, we went around 126th Street. There was a group of about 20 so people, 126th Street. And they stopped at that particular location, between Park and Lexington. That's we call it the all point. So they are talking about that because that has created an enormous amount of traffic of homeless people, so drug addicts that usually gather in that particular intersection. That makes that area also look in disorder.
So
I
the
assume-
unhoused and the people that are self-medicating are there.
Right.
And what is DOT?
No, we know, I'm just bringing that up as an added information.
Oh,
This is not DOT. I'm just
okay,
bringing
that's
that
like,
up
I'm
because-
trying to
I'm sorry.
compartmentalize here.
No, I'm just bringing that up as an added information because I was there during the last, that means last week's
Mhm.
walkthrough. We're having two walkthroughs, 2023 and now this week. Both have been organized by the mayor's office.
And so we will be doing that again, just to let it's for Operation Four Corners, myself, Jose, and a few others are on that team. We will be.
I'm sorry, this is Kyoka Jackson who is speaking. I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
people know who's talking.
I'm sorry, you are,
So I serve as the president of the 25th Precinct Community Council, but I also serve as the president of Presidents from Manhattan.
Oh, she is.
right, so you were there in the first one, were you there in the second one? Just
So
recently?
I'm on the committee and I didn't do the walkthroughs because I had done my own private walkthrough.
The old private one.
When you're saying walkthrough, are we talking about like multiple intersections or specifically
Yeah.
the 126th Street intersection?
Chief Shell, myself, the mayor, several other people did the walkthrough. But they didn't make it that particular time, but we had our own walkthrough. So I don't like to be, I like to,
But that was multi-agency,
it was hotel.
right, but
Yeah, but we did our
you chose,
Yeah, I chose that.
I think we're getting a little off track.
oh, yeah, okay.
I'm just going to allow.
Let me
have
just
the
finish
floor
my
for a second.
presentation and I can just ask, if anybody.
Okay, I just want
But
to,
I'm done.
Okay, then, what Sage said is correct, like, these are the only two in the nation. Those are detentions, they were lawsuits from the very beginning, 2023, there were lawsuits. As you hear from the fire department, a lot of people don't feel that it was very beneficial. It was done for public safety, but there's a lot of mixed feelings about it. So I'm not sure where the lawsuits are, but if it's closing, it's probably due to the lawsuit, we can probably investigate. But I'm sure it has, as soon as they opened, lawsuits were in. Before it opened, I'm not sure, but they had to wait legally until it opened and then. So we'll try to find it out.
Yeah, I Googled it and, I would expect if it is closing, that somebody else to have
We'll know
No.
before it closes.
We'll know.
They may just be hearing things a little before they announce it.
Mhm.
It may not be incorrect. It may be closing. But staff will always know before.
So let's,
Courtesy to give them a heads up.
let's move on.
Well, yeah.
I'm done.
Rafael and
Yes.
Antonio.
Thank you. I do have a question for Rafael. Yes.
So you repaved it beautiful. Where's our concrete? Where's our division between the street? I was with Diana Ayala and Elsie.
I didn't bring that up.
I was
And they
gonna go
came-
there.
And they came out of Costco and I'm like,
Right.
they find a nice car parked there.
Right, I didn't bring it up.
I'm not even sending you pictures because it's a parking lot. I don't need to send you pictures. There's a car there every day.
I did not, I didn't bring it up because I was expecting that question from you. What I'm telling you is this, that, the planter had already been chosen. They're going to be, rectangular shape, which is good. I don't know when they're going to be installing it. They are working on that because I'm on top of it, and that particularly on. But I do hope that it's going to be between maybe January and February.
Are we holding you to that?
That's, no, it just, see,
Okay.
I have to really push that because that's gonna be kind of my first project being finalized,
Okay,
big project that is.
thank you. And Pascal, you have the floor?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the DOT for the commissioner and your borough event. That was 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Thank you, but we'll be discussing that in, later on. Is that okay?
That's fine.
I do like to hear the feedback.
Will you be here a little bit later?
Why?
They gave the feedback.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that it was an hour, I believe, just
Yeah,
needed a
a
little
little
bit
more
more
than an hour.
time than an hour. It was great to have them out. I still haven't received answers to my questions.
Email it to me, please,
Okay, I'll try
because they
to,
will be very interested. Do you still have it?
I still have them, so I'll
Okay,
email it to you. I just say because it was so short, I feel like a lot of the Q&A time was spent on the 96th Avenue bus lane. There's other questions I'm sure the community had, so, please come back again, maybe do something that's a little longer, or, if the commissioner has to leave, someone stays behind and answers questions.
Write that down. They would like to have, they would like to hear that. The 96, I just visited that area as well. And I stayed there for about maybe 20 minutes. And the traffic was smooth.
It's a different time.
I asked her, no, I went there during the rush hour. From, I think it was a little bit before 5
That's not.
to about,
They don't believe you.
they don't believe it. It's true.
That's not rush
The reason why I come here is because I also want to get around.
Anyway, that is not rush hour on 96th Street, it's still before 5, just want you to know.
I asked the bus.
Hold on a moment, please. There's another question.
Oh,
Okay, so just to answer that,
Claudia Perez.
that's my neighborhood. That place is always jammed up. I don't know what time you went or what day you went, but I can tell you that it is always jammed there and it's always traffic. Because you have 3 different lights going there. And so you have that left turning lane, you have the right turning lane, you have the straight lane, you have the buses, you have double parked cars here, you have double parked cars here for, what's that place? Starbucks,
No.
right? And then you have.
what's the location
Hmm?
between what?
96th Street,
96th
in the
Street,
corner of
right
96th
at that
and
intersection.
Lexington.
Yeah, it is horrible
That's where a lot of people have gotten.
there. Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to go there another time because I was there today. Right
You need to
before
visit
5
more than
o'clock.
More than
From
once, more than once.
5, almost 5 to about 4:45.
Try about 3, 3,
Or
4.
3 in
Oh,
the
that's
afternoon.
insane, but
It's just.
Okay.
Claudia has a particular thing that happened.
Christina.
I'm sorry. Christina
Thank you.
Christina has a particular thing that happened recently on you. Okay,
don't wanna pick it up. All right.
But I did have a question. So they paved part of the street over there between 99th Street and 97th Street, right? Cause the side, the street was starting to dip, right?
Where is that?
On Lexington Avenue, right on Lexington, yeah.
Oh,
But what they did was, which I don't understand how they think. They paved half of the street. And then they skipped over and they paved the other half of the street. Why do they not pave the entire block? So between 99th and 98th, right, they only paved half of the street.
and they had left it for how long? Or they,
No, they finished.
how could they?
They're
I
finished.
mean, they removed the old asphalt?
Yeah.
And why have not gotten that?
Yeah, they
Or on
did
an
half a
email.
block. They did half a block.
And that's on Lexington Avenue? between
Lexington
97
Avenue
and
between
96?
98th and 99th, and then between 98th and 97th.
That's strange.
Yeah,
very
that's what I
strange.
said.
Jose?
Well, as you leave here tonight, I want you to go to 117th and look to the right. We've been asking for a few years, the lighting. I was giving you a few years, we've been asking for the lighting. The lighting is an issue on
A
117th.
street light?
Yes.
Park in Madison. As soon as you get out, look to the right and you'll see that it's very, very dark. We had a shooting there, we've had a couple incidents there, we need lights. And right now it's winter, so there's no trees.
Send me an
No,
email.
we don't have to say anything. We're
We're telling you, we're telling you now.
We're telling you now.
No, but I think, no.
What he's saying is that like
We've
you guys.
requested it in email form prior.
This is what happens. This is what happens. It carries more weight. That I received an email from
Okay,
the community board
I will send you an email.
indicating, because what I do is I forward that email with a comment
Mhm.
directly to the unit that takes care of street lighting.
We will do it. Thank you.
So that will help me as well.
Okay, so we will send you an email for 117th Street.
Yeah, so the reason I actually came into the room, because I literally live around the corner.
Right,
And I was on the phone already, is because this has been on the table for actually over 5 years, because the little boy got shot about 12 years ago, actually, and there was no light there. And there was a light that was put there that is way too high and does not illuminate the floor.
Right.
So we just, right now, I'm dealing with a case where a gentleman was riding his bike near a lifted area in the street. He broke his leg in 3 places. We had to witness that. And the reason why it's really concerning to me is because had there been some light, he would have been able to see it. So because I've continued to bring it to the community board, because it seems like you bring things here, you, as a community member, these are concerned. But the thing that the people who are on the board, who live close to things, their stuff gets done and our stuff is not. So it is beginning to become bothersome because it's a very dangerous area. This is not something that's just a little thing. This is illuminating a street where we can't see if we're stepping in poop. We can't see if we can't see the street because it's unlevel. And we've had numerous robberies there in the last couple of weeks. We've had numerous robberies.
And this has been going on for
It's been
wow.
over 12 years. Over 12 years, 5 years since the light got put up and still was not illuminating the block. And so I am tempted, just to let you know, nothing against you, because you're not the person that.
No, I don't take it
The
personal.
first time, I am tempted to do those walkthroughs with the mayor on 117th Street. Because it is, we cannot walk out of our apartment, we have to walk into the street in order to feel safe right now. It really is that
The
bad.
lack of light.
And I don't complain about I live on the block, I work with NYPD, I don't complain about my block, but right now, I have about 5 residents that have said that they've been robbed in that area, right in that area was not lit. And so now I'm here.
You carry a gun?
I do not carry a gun, I carry a stock for the lead battle.
So I gave you my card. Send it to me, but also CC the board,
Okay.
Kali and the rest of the folks.
Okay, so we're gonna be sending you 2 emails.
Yes, it's.
The email on 117th Street
Mhm.
and the email for ladder 14, I'm sorry. And ladder 14 about lighting,
Yes,
okay?
All right.
I wanted to ask him a question. You said that 124th Street,
Correct.
that's the street lighting as well? Or just that the illumination was,
Still illumination is poor.
It's too high up probably. It needs to be
Okay.
lower down.
Right.
And this is firefighter Robinson, his name is firefighter Robinson O'Connor, you see right there. So you'll be able to get his information. Okay. So let us continue with the district attorney's office of New York. This is for specifically different crimes that have happened in the past 30 days. Are they here now?
We have Andy Warshar, but that's for.
That's for later on. Okay, so let's move on. Do we have any public and safety and traffic advocacy groups present? Okay. And so now, this is the time for the committee outreach reports, which is, I know that Pascal and I went to see the DOT's commissioner in the neighborhood, and we already spoke about that. I thought it was interesting and very contentious. I saw two sides of people. Half 96th Street, half everybody else. And a lot of people were not being heard. People spoke in huge paragraphs that started to irritate people, and people just started talking amongst themselves, going, no one's listening. In the future, I think it should be where a lot of people are heard and not too many people are spoken over. That was my biggest takeaway. Dave, did you have a question?
No.
This, could you name the whole name of the conference? For the record? Not the not conference.
it's this commissioner in your borough.
In your borough, I thought it was named that.
The commissioner in your borough is
A five-part series, correct?
it goes, I don't think this is the second time we have it in Manhattan. It's all over the place. I mean, all over the boroughs, it's citywide. So we might have it again in Manhattan, don't know when. But it will probably be downtown because it's kind of a shift in location.
Well, your boss has an open invitation to come and to East Harlem and hear us once again.
Yes.
I've noticed that a lot of these like town hall events, somebody will, maybe like 5 people will speak because each person, has like an essay they want to read out about, something that isn't pre-screened.
Yeah.
Well, that is a town hall.
Yeah.
And we have different units representative at the table. Where if there is a question that deals with something that might be related to a particular unit, if the representative was there, then he or she will respond. And that's like the format that is being used for those conferences.
Yeah, I think the only issue was that out of the like 5 questions, 4 of them was about 96th Street.
96th Street.
Yeah. So like I had questions
Right.
about like congestion after we get the congestion price in January, like. What's,
So the congestion prices is more related to the state and the NTA.
not
You don't get
necessarily
put
the
in the equipment.
prices, yeah,
We
but
just wanted to, what was,
like how are neighborhoods north of 60th Street, like we're gonna expect congestion, there's gonna be more traffic, does the DOT have any plan, or like how are they looking at it? That was like one of my questions, but I'm just using that as an example, like there was no question regarding that being asked at the event, just because
Right.
most of it was just about 96th Street.
Right.
oh, but I do want to add. A lot of what was said with 96 was that the changes that were made were not positive changes. It was not helping the businesses.
The changes were.
The changes on 96 Street with the bus lanes.
Okay.
people have, taxi drivers have been letting people off, not going into the bus lane. Not taxi drivers, accessoride, because they're nervous of getting a ticket being in the bus lane. And so the person would have to get out, walk across the bus lane to get to
Right.
the curb, which is dangerous. They're taking accessoride for a purpose. And so these bus lanes have made it dangerous because they don't want to go into on the curb because it's another ticket.
So they stay right there in the driving lane.
You stay in the driving lane and the person has to get out with whatever non-ability that they have of walking to get to the curb. Meanwhile, there's bikes going in that lane as well, and there might even be a bike lane. Put in instead.
There is no bike lane.
No, I was saying, but if there are other places where there's a bus lane it is just dangerous.
In the 2 5 minutes, with a good range and timing, that they do that, they're causing a huge factor.
Right.
There's
There's only one lane.
Is there anything that precludes the accessoride from just stopping and letting off their passengers? Because the rule is that they're not supposed to be traveling in the bus lane as passengers, but if they're just letting them off.
There's a very vague rule
It's-
that applies to them as well as taxi drivers, but MTA is giving you tickets.
The bus would give you an automatic ticket, so you have to argue the ticket.
That's-
So they don't wanna even deal with having to argue with the ticket at this point.
Right, yeah.
You don't win.
So maybe there is something you can like talk to MTA and ask our liaison, like, hey, when it comes to accessoride and those type of
Yeah,
services.
that would be helpful.
Right, to alleviate that, waive those tickets and so forth.
So what was said was that you can go into that lane to make a drop off. You can do a quick pickup or drop off like a grocery goods and stuff like that, but people don't know. And so that information needs to go out there. People don't know, and because if you get the ticket automatically,
Still get-
what is saying that you were just there for 5 minutes to drop off something?
What's the, when you say an automatic ticket, what's the
Bus.
mechanism?
The bus.
The bus automatically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the driver, it's an auto, they have a
Yeah.
system.
I got one of those.
Wow.
Yeah, they
Which
will
is-
catch you quick.
Why they brought this up, 1 month ago, 2 months ago for 116, we were completely, well, actually, no, it was a private.
We haven't.
But
Michelle,
completely against it.
Just hold on a moment, is this Don?
This is Wanda Hopkins.
this is Wanda. Michelle, I can speak on the accessoride getting tickets. They don't get tickets.
So
Accessoride does not get tickets from the bus, from being in the bus lane.
So they just don't, so people just don't know, they don't know what the rules are.
Right, exactly.
Cause I've been told that they're just letting people off.
They can drop off. They're allowed to drop off on the bus lane. They are allowed to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Polly, did you have a question?
No, are you ready to, or still in committee outreach on this, or are you ready to move along the agenda?
No, I think we're good, except, Carlos, what did you do? Last,
Well, that's,
was there something that you did as a community outreach?
no.
Okay. So that is it for community outreach. Thank you. And thank you, Pascal, for coming. So now we have our presentations and discussions, Ghost Car Govern. Is Jesse Lang here?
Hello, yes, I am here.
Hello, Jesse Lang.
How are you all?
Fine, thank you. For housing and
So, yep, yeah, so I cover housing and transportation policy in the Borough President's office. Obviously here to talk about a transportation issue that a few months ago we came out with a report and plan for dealing with obstructed and obscured and fraudulent license plates that have become a real problem that maybe you all have noticed. So when I was invited to talk about our plan that we put out, I was thinking that just give like a brief overview of the plan and kind of some updates in the last few months. We put it out in August. And any questions that you want to go over. But and I'm not sure if you have seen the plan yet, but I am just going to drop a link into the chat. You don't have to look at it now because I'm going to kind of breeze through it, but there's the link in case you want to look back at it later for more details.
Jesse,
But
sorry, Jesse, do you want to share your screen and
Thank you.
talk us through it if you'd like, or?
yeah,
From
yeah,
the-
I'm happy to do
Okay.
that.
Okay, hold on one second. You can go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Can you drop the link from the chat into the minutes?
Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so when you go onto our website, we have sort of like a summary of the plan, but really like the full plan is in the downloads. We have a PDF that goes into a lot more detail. But essentially, this is a problem that we've been seeing across the city and is one that has really not um historically hasn't been addressed with the severity that we think is happening with this issue as it proliferates. So as we were researching to learn more about this issue and find out what the scale of the problem is, we estimate that right now probably a little over 5% of the vehicles that are passing through any sort of camera enforcement, whether it be tolling cameras, speed cameras, red light cameras, that they are unreadable either because plates are fraudulent and not matching any valid vehicle registration, or because people are covering plates to obscure the plate number. And what this amounts to is we estimated that this is costing New York City somewhere in the ballpark of $200 million a year between the lost toll revenue as well as ticket revenue. And that just for DOT operated traffic cameras alone, so those would be the red light and speed cameras, that over 100,000 vehicles that are passing that are being flagged and like caught by those cameras are unreadable. And so just a refresher, with the speed cameras, you have to be going at least you have to be going 11 miles an hour over the speed limit to even trigger the camera. And obviously with the stoplight, with the red light cameras, you have to actually go through a red light, either like over the white line or fully blow the red light to actually trigger the camera. And we don't have a percentage, but the 100,000 or more a month, and really it's like we've seen a steady increase over the last year, month to month. And so that was really the impetus to put out a plan and a series of recommendations to really start to tackle this issue. So we structured our recommendations in kind of two big buckets. One of them is around improving existing enforcement that's happening right now and improving the tools that enforcement officers can use um, to crack down on this issue. And then the other series of recommendations that I'll just quickly talk through as well are addressing some of the outdated city and state policies that actually make enforcement harder or impossible in some circumstances. So some of our recommendations for improving enforcement, we are proposing that the state DMV adopt digital, like a digital license plate tag. These usually would go under it would be like a RFID tag that would go under a vehicle's registration sticker, and then could be read by radio receivers that would be mounted next to a toll camera. And then that way, if a license plate is like bent over or has like one digit covered up, you don't need the actual image of the license plate in order to trace it back to a vehicle registration. This is something that would need state level action and state legislation. So going into the upcoming state legislative session, we're going to be working with our partners in Albany to push this one forward. The other tool that we want to use is providing NYPD traffic enforcement officers with better training and equipment. One thing that we found in speaking with NYPD is that a lot of the traffic enforcement officers that are writing tickets on the street oftentimes don't have the tools needed to verify if a license plate is fraudulent, it, or like at times aren't able to just like quickly at a glance. It requires like some level of sophistication and training and to be able to like quickly recognize if a license plate is obscured in some way, or like, you know, some of the things that we've seen that are used are like shields that are like remote control triggered and can be lowered over a license plate when they're passing through a camera. So we want to get NYPD more training so that they know what to look for these types of devices, as well as scanners, essentially, so that they can run every license plate and make sure that it does match a valid vehicle registration. Because another thing that we're seeing is people buying what's called dead plates, which look like real metal license plates. They are real metal license plates, but you can pick them up at like a scrapyard or on Craigslist oftentimes, and aren't currently tied to any vehicle registration. So those are a little bit harder to catch unless you actually run the vehicle's registration every time that you are seeing it. We also want to increase the use of AI tools. And that would be things like using AI, the camera operators on toll and traffic cameras using AI to be able to help like build a database of license plates, and so that like if you get a partial match of a license plate, or you know, you say like, I know that this one vehicle with a dent in this location on the bumper that is like a red Ford Explorer and has like these 3 digits on the license plate, but I can't read the other 3, that you're then able to like build a profile of a vehicle and more easily track down people who are repeat offenders of obscuring or obstructing their plates. Finally, we want to increase fines and penalties. Right now, the fines for obstructed and obscured license plates are, for at least for parked vehicles in New York City, are you get a $65 parking ticket if they can even locate the actual registration to write the ticket out against. We think that that's far too low, and that should be raised both for parked vehicles as well as vehicles traveling. And finally, we need to do more to stop the sale of tools that are used to cover or obstruct license plates. If you can like literally go on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, and buy a lot of these either fake license plates or license plate covers and things like that. This is something that the sale of these products has been illegal in New York City for several years. And the state also passed a law to ban the sale of these statewide, but we need a lot more action from both the city and state to crack down on the sale of these and actually enforce those laws. As well as particularly on the e-commerce side, it's proved to be very difficult, and so we need much more action from the state on that. And then our last couple of policies that we are pushing for at the city and state level. We want the city to create a traffic and parking enforcement equity task force. This is really to look at traffic and parking enforcement policies and patterns, and like where is enforcement happening, where are violations happening the most, is enforcement happening fairly across the city, or are there places where there's gaps in proper enforcement. So that's a recommendation that we're putting forth at a city level. We also are pushing hard for creating a residential parking permit program. I think that CB11 has actually weighed in on this. I believe that historically you've been supportive of a residential parking permit program. But this, sorry, did somebody just say something?
Quite a lot.
Okay, great. So this is something that would that could really help crack down on fraudulent vehicle registrations, because if you in order to get a residential parking permit, if you would need a valid license plate that is registered at your home address to qualify and then park in these curbside spots, it would be much easier for law enforcement to at a glance say, hey, if this person doesn't have a residential parking permit, they shouldn't be parking here. But also the reason why they don't have a parking permit might be because they don't have a valid vehicle registration. And so it would help. We hope that it would help incentivize people to have properly registered vehicles, as well as be a tool that law enforcement can use to make their lives easier. And then finally, the very last recommendation is that New York needs to do more with work with our neighboring states to help share information about repeat toll evaders from other states. Right now, the way that we do have reciprocity agreements with a couple of states, such as Massachusetts, but the states that we have those agreements with are really the lowest offenders. We have very few people that actually that agreement helps with. But for states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania, a lot of the tools that the city and state have to hold people accountable, such as seizing somebody's car if they have, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars of outstanding tolls, those tools go out the window if the vehicle is registered in another state. But if the state could work with our neighbors to create those reciprocity agreements in order to hold drivers with vehicle registrations from those states equally accountable, that would be very helpful. So that is the plan at a glance. I also just wanted to share, I'm gonna stop sharing now, but I will drop the link. We did get an update this week. There was a Gothamist article about it, about some of the work that the city has been doing to crack down on this issue since we put this this report out. And we have been really happy to see that this is since our office did get a lot of attention for it. The borough president was talking a lot about this issue on the news, and we had a lot of coverage about it. And since then, it does seem like the city is stepping up, and that this year they just reported that this year so far they've seized 7,500 vehicles from people with outstanding tolls, and that 5,000 of those vehicles have just been in the past few months. So it does seem like enforcement is that they are, taking this seriously, and that enforcement is stepping up. Although obviously we need to do more, especially with congestion pricing coming. There we are concerned that there is a big incentive for people to obstruct their license plates. So that is what I have for you all. The final thing I wanted to say is that as I mentioned, it is now illegal statewide to sell tools like license plate covers and like shields and things like that. The city is interested in knowing where the sale of these items is happening. So if you know of retailers in the district that are selling these, you can definitely let us know, and we can get that information to the city so that enforcement can happen. We did send a series of letters to online retailers like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and TikTok who were selling these things. And it's our hope that the city and state will work more with these online retailers. But we have heard from the city that they would appreciate help with identifying particularly brick and mortar locations that are selling these. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments that anyone has.
I have a question, and it had to do with the license plate. I noticed that the symbol for handicap is much, much smaller. So I'm still one of those guys who are getting summonses when I do all the silent free parking. Before, the logo was much bigger, you could see it, the meter maid needs training to see that. And what they do, they just give you the ticket, and I have to go tell it to another department so I can get suspended or taken care of. But the people at 106th Street that just give out summonses, they don't care about the handicap, and I think one of my questions is that the logo should be a lot bigger than what it is right now. It is very small if you look at the plate. Which is very important, and then training for the meter guys, to make sure that they just don't write the ticket, and then I have to go to another division to get it solved. So if you can look into that, that'll be great.
Yeah, we can definitely take that feedback back both, I think, to the precinct as well as the DMV to see if there's anything that can be done about the design of those plates.
Jesse, are you asking for letters of support from us? What is the ask here?
Or just, no, it's just.
Or are you just letting us know what is,
Yeah, I was no, yeah, we were just invited because I think this is a topic that some board members had expressed interest in. So this is really an informational presentation more than anything. I don't think that there's a specific ask for the community board at this time.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a question, Jesse. Do you guys have any numbers on like the rate of like criminality or like personal injury associated with ghost cars? Because I'm hearing a lot of like decreased revenue for the state or the city, but not about like why are these actually dangerous? Is this like a real safety thing? And I'm sure like in theory, yes, but just like how big of an issue is it?
Yeah, that's a really good question to flag, and yeah, it's a real safety issue for a couple of different reasons. From the perspective of the traffic cameras that aren't, and like these lost traffic tickets that then aren't being written to people. Our perception is that a lot of the people that are covering their license plates to go through traffic cameras and then not get speeding tickets or red light tickets, that these are repeat offenders and people who are more likely to be driving recklessly. And that I think that there is some evidence to support that. We have also seen a rise in vehicles with fraudulent license plates being used in hit and runs, or even like in other types of violent crime, like shootings and being used as getaway vehicles and things like that. So yes, absolutely. Beyond just the revenue, this is a real safety issue, and these vehicles are being used in ways that are making people unsafe. And I think our position is that we, for at least on the traffic ticket side of things, we would like the number of traffic tickets that are being written to be zero. We don't want people running red lights or speeding, and we don't think that the city needs to be collecting that revenue, but we do think that people need to be getting those fines in order to improve their driving behavior and drive more safely.
Okay, Jose, did you have a question?
Question, comment. I definitely agree that ghost cars are a huge issue. Honestly, I don't know why New York State doesn't make it completely illegal to have a paper plate. I think the majority of those ghost cars are paper plates, and New York State should not allow a paper plate on a vehicle for any reason. And that would simplify all of our lives. I know that tolling, you guys do a great job with cameras, because I know a few people that had excessive Easy Pass and they got pulled over and they got their cars towed, and I didn't like the beginning. So there are things about your presentation I love and things that I kind of hated. That whole RFID and that whole, it feels a little too much like you're tracking me, like, everywhere I go. I honestly, that part I really disliked. I think that the system that we have with our plates works, everything makes sense. I agree with you that the covers, I think that's enforcement, right? You see someone on cover, pull them over, remove it, ticket them, and I do believe that the tickets should be higher than what they currently are, particularly for parked or in process, because it is an issue of public safety, right? If these vehicles don't have insurance and they hit you, no one will cover you. And if you're a pedestrian, you're on your own. If you have your own vehicle, I mean, hopefully you have full coverage and then something, but if you only have liability, now your vehicle is damaged and that's it. If you have personal injuries, hopefully whatever your liability insurance will cover. So I know that it is a huge public safety issue, but I don't like that whole beginning with the tracking. I do think technology is important to have. I think it's important but I think you can implement a lot of this AI in the cameras that you already have in the city instead of I don't see how the city can track the number of cars that we're talking about in New York State alone. Like, it's insane. And what happens when vehicles come from other states and it's just, I think it's but I'm sure one day in the future we can have that. But I do think that you guys should be looking into, I'm not sure why paper plates are legal in any capacity, because there are some paper plates that have a certain legality. I know, like exotics, when they come overseas, that makes sense. But they do offer them for like some dealerships and things like that, and they really shouldn't. They should just pay for their dealer plates. They should pay for their dealer plates and their dealer insurance. And if they can't do it, then they shouldn't have it. Because it puts the community at risk of having an issue, because people are obviously taking advantage of this.
Yeah. So, so I really do appreciate the feedback on the digital tools that we've proposed. That's really helpful to hear. On the paper license plate side, that is that it's proved to be a more challenging issue to address. So paper license plates are not used at all in New York State. In New York, you'll never see a paper license plate that says New York State on it on the street. You'll always see them for other states. And the reason why is because if you buy a car from a dealer in New York, you just get the license plate on the spot, and the any used or new car dealer basically just has a stack of license plates that they then register with the DMV on the spot and put it on the vehicle. More and more states are moving to this, but it's taking a little bit of time for those states to, because like New York is not the only state that's seeing this problem. So Texas recently banned paper license plates, but the law doesn't go into effect until 2025. But at some point in the near-ish future, we won't see any paper Texas license plates anymore. Two of the states that have been really big offenders are New Jersey and Georgia. And a lot of that has to do with the laws in those states that basically allow anybody to, like any person to establish themselves with the DMV of those states as a car dealer, and using any printer that they want to just print off paper license plates and not have to actually register those with a real car that exists. Those states are trying to make moves to make it harder for people to fraudulently print paper license tags, but the policy has been a little bit slow moving on that. But I think those states are moving in the right direction. In the meantime, we did explore the possibility of, like, can New York ban people from using paper license plates from other states? Can we say with some certainty that like any paper license plate that you see in New York is fraudulent? But I think that what in our conversations with law enforcement and other stakeholders, we found that would be really tricky, and like the legality of that might come into question. So in the meantime, we're going to continue pushing for those other states to do more wherever possible to make it harder to print fraudulent tags, or like get rid of paper tags entirely.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming and presenting. If
Sure.
we have any further questions, we can contact you. You can leave your information in the chat, and we will move along at this particular point. Thank you so much, Jessie Lang.
Okay, sure, no problem. Bye.
Okay, and now to old business, and had made a switch in the lineup so that the Legal Aid Society would be talking at the present time, and it's up there already. So we are going to continue with old business, our extended discussion proposed with the discovery reform changes. Is Amanda or Al?
Holly,
present?
we're both here,
Hi.
yep. Hi.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Jack. I am the policy director at the Legal Aid Society. Prior to that, I was a trial attorney, first in Brooklyn for 8 years and then in Manhattan for 4. And so I come to you from that perspective as well. And I'm here with my colleague, Holly Conliffe, also comes out of the trial office in the Bronx and is now one of our supervising training attorneys. So I'm just gonna, I understand, I see the hour and it's a late hour to talk about the arcane procedural laws that rule the criminal legal system. So I just want to say thank you for having us, and we'll try to be as brief as possible. I also wanted to frame this by saying, I know you had a discussion earlier, and we appreciate you bringing the defense perspective into this. And I know that DA Warshauer is here as well. So hello, and you'll get to hear it from him again too. But we wanted to just give you a quick overview from our perspective of what's washed out over the years. And then Kali's going to do some quick explainers and some of the more technical pieces, which we think are important to understand for why our belief is that no rollbacks are necessary. And so I'm going to try to situate that in the next 2 minutes. And I want to say also, that this is a very local issue, right? Because crime and victimhood and people charged with crime, that's happening locally all the time. But what we're talking about are laws that govern our entire state. So it's also a statewide issue. And I practiced before DA Bragg took office, and I practiced after. I practiced before discovery reform and after. And not every county is as lucky to have such a fair-minded prosecutor as Alvin Bragg. And so that's one of the things I just want to kind of center this conversation in, that we're talking about laws that govern the entire state. And so these were laws passed along with the bail reform laws in 2019, went with then Governor Andrew Cuomo. They were enacted in January of 2020 together, so they often get lumped together, but they were, two distinct parts of the criminal process and of course of the statutes. And we've been dealing with rollbacks every year. We came together with the DAs and the state actors in 2022 and hashed out some of the things that needed to be hashed out, came to the table and talked about that, and then also joined together and said one of the issues with these reforms, both really, but I'll keep it to discovery, was that they were never funded. We finally kind of caught up to much of the rest of the country saying that we should have transparency in evidence, that folks, have the right to see the evidence against them before they decided to plead or go to trial, but we never funded it. And so much of the fight that we've engaged in, and we've engaged with our defender brothers and sisters across the state, and honestly with the DA offices too, is to say, give us some money. Let us modernize. We modernize the laws. It's time to modernize our technology. And I think that's been one of the biggest wins is the last two cycles. Prosecutors had received small funding, but defense hadn't, but both, all boats rise. We both got equal funding for discovery from the state for the past 2 years to implement some of the systems that we needed to implement, especially because in the last decade, body-worn cameras have taken over. The digital platforms that the police and the prosecutors have to then transfer over to us. I used to carry around a blank CD to get discovery, right? Because it was a 911 call and some DD5s, and that's changed as well. So the funding is something that we said, we think a lot of these problems on both ends, first reviewing the discovery on the prosecution side, and then of course defense doing the same, can be solved by hiring up litigation staff to help, and by investing in digital platforms. And I'll say that what we're happy to say is that Legal Aid, we're the largest defender in the city, of course, but we finally have brought online the same digital evidence platform that the Manhattan DA uses as well, and other DAs in the city. And so we're really hopeful to see that as it comes online. We've already had some early success with folks being able to organize and understand the discovery and watch 10 body cameras at once, right? You can make a super angle, and how much that's saved our colleagues' time in preparing their cases. So I'm going to turn it over to Kali, but I also just want to say, and forgive me, maybe the personal anecdote, my father is a pastor, and so I was very much raised with the golden rule. I very much come out of that tradition, do unto others. And I think some of this, what I'd ask you to think about is, if you were charged with a crime, or a loved one was charged with a crime, would you want the government to give you all the evidence they have before you have to make a really consequential decision, like whether or not to plead guilty to a crime or to risk a trial? And so we're really talking about common sense modernization here. And as with anything new, there's fits and giggles to get things started, and there's stumbling blocks, and there's lessons that we learn. I'll also say, and I think Kali will talk about this, we also, about a year ago, December of last year, we got the first big decision from our highest court, the Court of Appeals, that really laid out a lot of guidelines, said things like, the laws never required a perfect prosecutor. Cases aren't being dismissed for honest mistakes, for due diligence. And the other thing that I know Kali will talk about, and I'm going to stop here, is just I want to also just say that the felony dismissal rate for speedy trial has remained very steady, pre-reform till today. And so I think that's what happens too, is a lot of times it's these really violent and heinous crimes are being dismissed for paperwork. And we just don't see the data that supports that. So I'll pass it over to Kali, and then I'll quickly sum up when she's done. And thanks again for your time tonight.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yes, I join Amanda in thanking you for having us. I'm Kali Conbliff, as AJ said. I come from having practiced in the Bronx for a decade before transitioning into working in all the boroughs in the city. And my primary focus, honestly, for the past 4 years has been training and helping attorneys to understand discovery and speedy trial. And so I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible, and to do that in a very quick way. Basically, I think what's really important for everybody to fully understand is where we came from, right? How we all practiced prior to these reforms and what that system looked like in order to understand how the proposed rollbacks, which, these are similar, pretty much have been the same suggestions for the past 3 years, are really detrimental to progress because they essentially are going to, even though they don't seem like it on the surface, bring us back to where we came from. So before these reforms, New York was one of the 4 most regressive states in the country, if you can believe it, when it came to discovery. And in fact, the law was called the blindfold law. And there's a more sort of expansive discussion of that in the handout that got passed around to you all. And I hope that you'll take some time to read it. There are some links in it to stories that are very good demonstrations and examples of what used to happen under that system. And essentially what it used to require is that for basic paperwork, recordings, et cetera, the defense would have to write out a request, a list of items that they were requesting from the prosecutor, and the prosecutor was supposed to return or, respond to that with the items within 15 days of that request. So very early in the case, the defense would file a request. The prosecutor then very often would totally ignore it. So very frequently, in many, many cases, even here in New York City, these requests would go ignored for months, a year, multiple years in some cases, or right, and like where I worked in the Bronx, it was not as largely ignored as I would say my colleagues in Manhattan experienced, for example, but they would trickle out materials. So you'd get an arrest report in, a few weeks after you requested it, and then that would be it for 2-3 months, right? Meanwhile, there's a person who's maybe sitting in jail or can't work because they have a pending case, is missing, having to get childcare because they're coming back and forth to court all the time. And the reality of their lives is that they weren't actually able to go to a trial because they didn't have what they needed to do. But the prosecutor was able to state ready, which has a very special meaning in New York. I'm not going to do a whole lecture on the speedy trial law in New York, but some of you may understand this, but it's essentially, it's a system of, we don't measure whether you've gotten a speedy trial by how long it actually takes your case to go to trial in New York. We measure it by how long it was until the prosecutor was able to declare themselves ready in the courtroom, right? Or off calendar with a letter. And essentially what that means is that once the prosecutor says those magic words, "I'm ready," the clock stops. So in pre these reforms, right, and where I worked, at least in the Bronx, that meant that at the criminal court arraignment, before the case had been assigned to a lawyer, before anyone had done investigation, collected the evidence, looked at the evidence, talked to their witnesses, they stated ready. So no time was accumulating on these cases. So that meant that at least under our statutory system, the right to speedy trial was essentially meaningless. And the only time that counted towards this potential speedy trial dismissal was time requested by the prosecutors. But because discovery was withheld, very frequently they could count on defense attorneys having to say, "Judge, I don't have the discovery yet. Give me an adjournment. I need the discovery before I start." And this would go on for a year, 2 years, and there was basically nothing we could do about it. There were no consequences. And the reason there were no consequences is because the system for ensuring compliance was what's called sanctions, right? And sanctions are measured by prejudice. What does that look like when you're on our side of the table? Well, I don't know what the prosecutor or the police have in their files. I don't know what the evidence that I don't have contains. So if there's a police report out there that says something that would be favorable to my case, or, it's a little late, so I'm not coming up with great examples and I don't want to take too long, but you can imagine there might be very useful evidence that by withholding it, I am unable to then go and do more investigation. I'm prejudiced in a number of ways. My client is prejudiced in a number of ways, right? But I can't articulate that to the judge and have the prosecutor sanctioned or get what I need because I don't know what's in there. And so what would happen is that all we could do essentially is once we got the material, once it was turned over, we would just beg and plead for additional time to be able to prepare our case and potentially do our investigation or speak to our client with the benefit of having the evidence finally, maybe a year later, right? Right as we're being sent out for trial. So that was our reality. That's not an acceptable system for New Yorkers to live in, right? It just isn't. It's not what any of us want. And I know, right, that as I'm describing this, I'm sure like ADA Warshauer is here and he's thinking of like, I don't want that either. I don't think that most prosecutors want that. The problem, though, first, as AJ said, is that we're not talking about a law that just affects Manhattan. So it doesn't really matter only what DA Bragg's office wants to do, right? Because I can tell you that there are places upstate, we have colleagues upstate where this is not, they just don't have the same reality that we do. That's number one. But number two, if, even the best intentioned prosecutors will make really devastating errors if we don't keep the system we have in place. Because one of the big problems with the proposals that are on the table, in addition to the fact that basically they want to take away that nexus, and I'm sorry, I missed a key thing that this law does. I've just sort of skipped over that step. So the reform, the way that it fixed those mistakes or those big problems with the old law was that it said, okay, DAs, you can't state ready for trial and stop that clock and prevent that possibility of dismissal because time is running against you until you provided all the discovery to the defense. That was huge for us because what it meant was that we were no longer in a position of having to explain for me personally, right? And I'm not even my clients. I mean, this has been transformative because what it really means is that now they get to see the evidence against them and know what's out there before they have to make the biggest decision they've had to make in their whole lives, right? Am I pleading guilty? Am I taking this case to trial? That is a huge decision with monumental consequences. And so this enables them to actually have a fighting chance, okay? Now, with that understood, what the proposals seek to do is to take that away, to say, no, it's no longer a prerequisite to readiness. Now, if the prosecutor turns something over late, what are we going to do? We're going to go back to that prejudice analysis. We're going to say, okay, the defense has to establish why this is harmful to them. Well, it's inherently harmful, right? And that's the problem with this analysis, is that it's always prejudicial, but that's not the prejudice that we're talking about. That's not how judges read prejudice. So what this will really mean is that there will be no consequences, yet again, for late disclosure. And beyond that, the other thing that's really problematic is that now the law ensures currently what's called automatic discovery, which means that the prosecutors don't get to sort of pick and choose what to turn over, right? And that has been hard for prosecutors to adjust to, understandably, because it means that there's a lot more volume that they have to obtain than they used to. So, there's a list of items that they have to go get. And when, and in their minds, some of it doesn't matter. And sometimes that's true, but there's no way for them to know that until they obtain it. And so the problem with this system that that's being suggested is that not only does it take the consequences away for failure to actually comply with the law, but it also says that they want to go to a system that's called substantial compliance. What that will look like is that the prosecutor gets to choose what is necessary to prove their case. Well, that's sort of a convenient standard because what it means is that they don't have to go and seek out anything that contradicts the person's guilt, right? So if it's the definition of what's favorable, right? And I'm not saying they're going to do that intentionally. I'm not saying they're going to ignore exculpatory evidence if they know that it exists. The problem is, how do you know it exists unless you're required to categorically obtain everything that's out there and relates to the case? And so this new standard that they're suggesting basically will restore all of the old problems that we had under the old law. And I really encourage you to go look at the links that we have in our handout, because you'll see what I mean. I'm sure I'm not explaining it as well as I should be in terms of the consequences that it has for our clients. And just briefly, and AJ, cut me off if I'm being too long, I just wanted to kind of counter a couple of the things that were said, or that I was actually here when ADA Warshar did his presentation in the spring. And there are just a couple things that, I wish I could have said then that I want to just say now. And that is, and I totally respect everything that you're saying, and I understand your perspective. But there are a few things that I think people are maybe not fully understanding. And that is, one, there is this implication in the document that you've provided that prosecutors only have 20 to 35 days to provide all of this material. That's actually totally inaccurate. So there is a time frame, an initial time frame for discovery. It's essentially, though, what's encouraged by the statute. In fact, a case cannot be dismissed unless, under a speedy trial dismissal, that is, unless a prosecutor exceeds the time under that statute. And what those timeframes are 6 months on a felony and 90 days on the average misdemeanor, on the most serious type of misdemeanor, okay? And it can be even longer for a variety of technical reasons that I won't go into, but they're called exclusions. Like if somebody makes a motion, the time stops. There are all kinds of things that stop the time clock. So it's a minimum of 90 days or 6 months that they have to collect this evidence and disclose it. It's not 20 days. The other thing, AJ kind of covered the issue on data, and I think we're kind of beyond talking about that at this point. I think the other thing, though, that's very important is this. I know there was a lot of time spent and a lot of concern about this notion that this discovery law has created problems for victims, that it's created problems for where, people's personal contact information and names are being disclosed, and that is doing two things: that it's creating danger for those people, and that it's making people more hesitant to testify. In our experience, that had just not been borne out. That was something that the DA's office was very vocal about before the law passed in opposition to it, and it just has not come to fruition. And the fact is that the law has some very serious protections in the first set of rollbacks, even within 3 months of this law being enacted, before it had a chance to have any of those consequences. There were significant restrictions placed on it that have basically enabled prosecutors to withhold automatically, without a motion, without any discretion by the court, the names and contact information of any 911 caller, the names and contact information of the victims or witnesses of sex crimes, the names and contact information of anybody who is a witness in or a victim in a gang case, in a case where there's this person who is alleged to have a substantiated affiliation with a criminal enterprise. So these very serious cases where people might actually have a concern about coming in to testify because of potential risk to their safety, actually the law permits prosecutors to automatically withhold that information from the defense. And then there's an additional protection, which is that then, for those cases where that doesn't exist, they can go to the judge and they can explain why, in this case, this person has a fear for their safety, or, this particular person who's being charged with a crime has a history of violence and a history of witness interference or whatever it is. And if that's the case, they can get an order from the court saying you can't disclose this information. So given all of that, I want to just make sure, and I'm not saying that I don't understand where the concern came from, but the truth is it has not been borne out. And that's in part because the law permits these things, but it's also just because it just actually turns out it's not something that is all that common. So I think, AJ, please jump in if I missed anything,
No,
but
I mean, we've taken all of our time. Just wanted to say that the other thing that we want to just leave you with is that a lot of the work we do too, and that DA Bragg has followed through on his election promises, is to try to find the opportunities to engage in community safety through the investments that we all need. And we'll say it till we're blue in the face, like safe and stable housing is always the cornerstone of that, right? And we all agree on that. The neighborhood navigator system, the DA's office has just launched. It's great, like working on real off-ramps for mental illness, where we actually treat it as the public health problem it is, because the courts and prisons don't solve it, right? People get released. So we just really hope that we can move the discussion away from rolling back these really common sense laws that have just given us transparency and honestly, in many cases, helped us to move cases along much more quickly too. Because if you see the evidence against you and it's not so great, it's a lot easier to talk to your client about taking a plea. Just to be good, it's a lot harder when you're saying, I don't know either. I don't know what the evidence is. So we really think these were common sense reforms. The issues that prosecutors saw were heard and dealt with soon after they were enacted, and we finally have the funding to make it happen. So we want to get to the place where we can talk about how we can continue to find solutions that make everybody's neighborhood safer here in New York City and also beyond.
oh, and can I just make one more? I also just want to say,
Want to make sure we have time for questions that I know
oh,
one.
okay. Go ahead. That's fine. I don't need to.
Okay, go ahead, Jose.
Hi, AJ, and Callie, was it? Or-
Holly,
Yes.
Callie.
Callie.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. That was a great presentation. Obviously, this is a very debated topic in any community, but in our community in particular, it's made Black and brown, and we've had significant issues with police in the past. NDAs, but if I would be curious, because I know you jumped around back and forth between the three, we have three recommendations currently. And the rest of the community board is going to see this presentation. And I would like to see if you could go just one by one. And that would make it much easier because there's a big variation in our community board. And it would be easier for them to understand it point by point. And I know the first one was requiring prejudice, which you kind of spoke about. If you could give us, and I know it's time, but it's a very important topic. So you could give us.
I can try to give you a soundbite to kind of to make it pretty clear. So again, by replacing the potential consequence of a speedy trial dismissal for the failure to comply with the discovery obligations with a prejudice standard, you're basically placing the defense in the position of having to, I don't know, be a mind reader, right? To see the future, to know what they can't know. We don't know what the police wrote down in a document. We don't know what the potential witnesses who are named on a list somewhere have to say because we just don't have access to the information. And so I can't, as a defense attorney, stand, and this is how prejudice is litigated. We would be asked basically, well, how are you harmed by not having that piece of paper right now? And unfortunately, I can't answer that question because I don't know what that piece of paper says, right? And so yes, once I get the piece of paper, the judge is likely to now give me more time with it to prepare and hopefully investigate. But what ends up happening is if that's given to me 2 years into this case and this person's been incarcerated the whole time, Well, that's too bad, right? Like what, and if the if I now can't conduct a very good investigation, there's no way to get that back with a weak sanction, right? There's just no way to replace the investigation I could have done, the cameras I could have gone to get surveillance from, or the witness that I could have talked to who had a recent recollection. I can't make my client whole by then saying, well, I'll get what's called an adverse inference, right? Which is basically where the judge instructs the jury that had this, there was a late disclosure of this information, and had it been known to the defense, there may have been, favorable information discovered from this witness. Well, okay, but what does that mean to a juror? Very little, right? And so that's the problem, is like, we're not actually, it's not what it's not going to do is ensure compliance. And these sanctions sometimes help, but very often don't. So that's why we really oppose the prejudice analysis replacing the speedy trial.
Thank you for that. The second one is requiring the defense attorney to challenge discovery violations with a timely manner.
Yeah. So just to, we didn't have an opportunity to address this in our, in the thing that we sent you all. However, to be clear, there is a requirement in the statute that the defense alert the prosecution as soon as it's aware that discovery is missing, and that we challenge the certificate of compliance, which is that piece of paper they have to file when they've completed discovery compliance, as soon as practicable. And when we don't do that, judges punish us, right? Our motions don't get granted. That has become basically the new normal. So this is an unnecessary time limit, number one. But number two, it's really shifting the burden if you think about it, because what it's saying is the defense is not permitted to file a challenge and claim a violation if something they could not have known exists is later belatedly disclosed by the prosecutor. And so there, again, it's removing the consequences, removing the incentive for a prosecutor to comply. Because if a defense attorney can't know of the existence of something, or they can't figure it out in the terabyte of information that they're reading in 30 days or 35 days, whatever the proposal said, right, after the prosecutor has taken 5 months to review it, then that's it. Too bad, right? I mean, so that's our big problem with it, right? The reason that the statute was worded the way that it was, and that was an addition that, I was in the room when that was written. It was in 2022. And when that was added, it was intentionally not created with a specific number of days in mind, because every case is different. The amount of discovery in every case is different. And it's never going to be possible for the defense to guess at everything that could exist that hasn't been disclosed. So it's intentionally supposed to be about what we know exists and what we know is missing, and we have an obligation to turn that over immediately once we know. And when we fail to do that, again, judges do punish us for that, right? We don't have our motions granted. So I think it's just an unnecessary change.
The third one, imposing a substantial compliance requirement.
Yeah.
Which you spoke about, but again, I just want to make sure the community board can, in a sequential manner.
Absolutely. So in some ways, this is the most concerning proposal of them all, because what it will mean is that the defense, or rather the prosecutor, has the discretion to decide which materials are important to obtain. So while they may, I think that the proposal, I don't have it in front of me, and it's been a little while since I've read it, but I know the gist of it. And essentially it is that they have to disclose what's in their possession, what's constitutionally required, actually in their possession, meaning in their file, on their computer, on their desk, right? What's constitutionally required, right? So that means if it's exculpatory, it has to be disclosed. And then I think that's sort of it. And the problem with that is, and I'm sorry, anything that they need essentially to prove their case. But the problem with that is that it's self-serving, right? So it means that if you are a prosecutor and you're thinking about, and you believe this person is guilty, What you're going to do is you're going to gather the evidence that you're going to get everything that you have, which in theory is probably consistent with the theory of your case. And if you see something that in your files that's not consistent with your case, yes, you're under a constitutional obligation to turn that over. And then you're going to give them, all the paperwork that's necessary to build the case and prove the elements, right? What about the whole reason that the discovery statute was expanded to require prosecutors to provide specific categories of material that they may not need to prove their case is because it's those very materials that very often contain the favorable information that if they're not under an obligation to provide and to obtain, we will never learn of. And the fact is, that was sort of the standard before the reforms. And what happened is that New York had the fourth highest rate of wrongful convictions in the country. So it's a very big problem. And we really, it's not to say that I think that this is intentional, that prosecutors are intentionally hiding evidence. It's actually something that I think helps prosecutors to not have the discretion, to not be the gatekeeper of what matters in a case and what doesn't. And the fact is, as defense, who have a theory of a defense, we are really in a unique position. We're the only ones who can know what is consistent with our theory of the defense and what isn't. And so we can't ask in an adversarial system for a prosecutor to do our job in addition to theirs.
And let me just add on for the members too. This is where the technology is really important because I know sometimes our adversaries across the aisle can't lay it here, but a lot of this is police giving over the information they have in a timely manner to the prosecutor attached to the case. The NICE system is what NYPD has, what the Manhattan DAs have, now what Legal Aid has, right? So we are now in a symbiotic system that should help negate any need for a standard like substantial compliance.
Yeah, and I think probably in about a year, and I think Manhattan is actually among the first, Manhattan and the Bronx are probably going to be the first to actually go forward with it. But within about a year, our hope is that our offices are going to be able to literally communicate over this system. So we will be able to, the police will send this material to the DAs on this system, and then the DAs will be able to click a button and send it right to us so that there isn't this sort of, like a technical glitch, something happened. And it will have like proof. There will be logs that show everything. So there's no more guessing. There's no more gotcha. And I think that as AJ said, that's going to be huge. And so we just need more time and more investment in this for it to work seamlessly before we gut it. I mean, it just hasn't been long enough. We've had one case from the Court of Appeals interpreting this law. And, that may not mean a lot to you guys, but this is a very young statute, and we need to give it time to work before we gut it.
Well, everything matters.
So now that you explained.
A follow-up question.
Follow-up, well, the rest was for the explanation, wasn't a question. But the question was, Ali, when the 2019 reforms were taking place, you said you were in the room. Were there any prosecutors involved in that?
Yes, and I just to be clear, I was not personally, although Legal Aid was involved in the 2019 reform, as in like when it passed in 2019. I was in the room in 2022 when we dealt with the rollbacks, and we had actually there. I can't remember if DA Bragg was there himself or if someone from his office was there, but there was representation of every single DA's office in the city. And
in 2022, but we're not sure about 2019.
No,
do you know that, AJ?
Yeah, no, prosecutors, law enforcement were consulted because it of course was a law that had a much longer life before it was actually passed. But I know that was one of
about a decades long fight.
Not quite that long, but no, all the stakeholders were consulted. But I do know that that was something that has been used a lot in headlines to try to malign it, but it's actually not true. I was part of those efforts in a previous job before Legal Aid, and their prosecutors, law enforcement were consulted.
Were consulted, but were they in the room? That was the question.
Yeah, and the shaping of the statute. Yeah, I mean, none of us, only lawmakers were in the room when it passed and when they actually like did the final shaping of the law, but the lead up to it, you know, there's a lot of back and forth and hearings that goes on before any statute, you know, sees a committee and then sees a vote. So yeah, all stakeholders were consulted.
And to be clear, in the 2022 rollbacks, where that change with respect to the timing of defense notification and all of that were made, it was a prosecutor who was writing out the language. I mean, like she and I were going back and forth. It was a real joint effort, right? It was both sides fully engaged.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions? I'm just gonna take the members first and then any other committee members, Public Safety and Transportation Committee members that have questions?
None at this time.
Can you say if there's anybody online? Can you check?
A lot of comments.
That are Public Safety Transportation Committee members.
Oh, God, he's bad.
There are no hands raised.
What's in the chat?
Let's see here. Oh, that's just the chat that's unchecked from this section here, but the last person was Amanda chat. I'm just explaining that. She's happy to be here.
Okay, so there's no other committee members that have questions?
None here.
Okay, say your name though. So that people.
My name is Derek Stampone, Committee Board 11 member. I have a question about the third recommendation about the substantial compliance requirement. It states in part C there, like all other materials in the prosecutor's actual possession. I guess my question is like, would it be true that with the new data system, sort of direct connecting NYPD with the Manhattan DA's office, that any possible police materials would be in possession of the Manhattan DA and would be turned over? You mentioned like discretion of what to turn over because I guess it's like removing this requirement of like all possible materials. But wouldn't C sort of cover that? And additionally, you mentioned, for example, like adverse inference, like there are other remedies that a judge could use in response to something that went awry with discovery. And I guess like, why don't you think those things are sufficient for the discretion of a judge to sort of use those things at their disposal?
Yeah, I mean, I can first with respect to NICE, the platform, the discovery platform. To be clear, it's not that all of the police's databases and all the things that they collect live on that system. They have to upload everything or transmit, I don't know exactly how it'll work, right? But they have to put all the materials onto NICE. They then transmit those materials to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor then can just much more easily provide them to the defense. However, it doesn't remove discretion from the police. So it is one of the big, as AJ alluded to, one of the bigger issues, I think, with compliance in the city, at least, has been a breakdown with NYPD, where prosecutors will ask for the entire file, and what they get back isn't always the entire file, and then it becomes a game of chasing down, this file and that file that hasn't been provided. And so that I don't know. It's not to say that we want them to be doing that, but the issue is that if they don't do it, then we don't get the material, and there could be something lost in translation. So that's answer to your first question. In answer to your second question, of course, there are other remedies. I use the example of an adverse inference. The problem is that, sure, if a prosecutor turns something over in the middle of trial, right, a more severe sanction, a more severe remedy might be imposed, like mistrial or dismissal if it was significant enough, if it was really egregious. The problem is that when you're talking about prejudice, and the standard is actually that the prejudice has to match the sanction. So the sanction essentially has to ameliorate, and that makes sense. Like I saw that, like that's a logical system. The problem, though, is that sometimes there is no appropriate sanction to meet the prejudice that our clients have experienced. There's no way of getting that 2 years back. There's no way of, finding those witnesses who are now no longer living in New York City. And short of a dismissal, there's nothing that will actually ameliorate that prejudice, because we can't necessarily find that witness, right? Or we can't track down that surveillance footage that's been deleted. And so the problem with these sanctions is that yes, there are other sanctions. There's preclusion of evidence. Yeah, that's great if the evidence happens to be favorable to the prosecutor and they disclose it late. But more often than not, the stuff that gets disclosed late is stuff that might have been fruitful had we had it sooner for the defense. So, yes, there are some sanctions that can appropriately address discovery violations, but very frequently they don't.
Thank you. So next we have Andrew Washauer, Jordan Stockdale from the District Attorney's Office. Thank you, Legal Aid Society, and now we'll go on to our next presentation, follow-up presentation.
Rebuttal. Yep. Hi, and good evening. And I don't know that I want to phrase this as a rebuttal, because I don't think it's necessary to say it's a back and forth. The one thing I would certainly say is, if you leave here and say the thing that I need to most pressure my legislators to do is fund supportive housing, you're going to get everyone who works anywhere within a 10-block radius of this building jumping up and down. We need help. We need help from outside the system. The formal law enforcement system cannot cure all the problems that we have in New York. People stare at us because we are the last stop along a chain of failures, but we're not here to fix everything, and we need the involvement of other stakeholders. So please, if you disagree with everything I say after this, or everything my colleagues just said before this, please take that, and I think we all agree with that, and there needs to be more pressure. The same goes for mental health funding, and I would assume that we have agreement there too. The problems that I have are, I think I practiced under the old system. I am very glad to not be standing before you defending the old system. It was not a defensible system. As advocates, though, I think the defense bar has done a very good job of phrasing any changes to the current system as a reversion to the old one, because the old one was so bad, and that's a very convenient straw man. No one is proposing anything that resembles a return to the old system. And I'll get into the substantial compliance standard in a second. It's been misunderstood by the governor's people, by the legislators, and maybe by some folks here. I don't think we'll get it, to be frank, but I think it is a less damaging standard than has been proposed, or as it's been described. On the stats, though, I do have to take one place where I really do disagree. Our felony dismissal rate for 30-30 reasons is 48% last year. That was 21% in 2019. It's gone up 162% from before discovery reform to post. The percentage of our dismissals that are based on speedy trial problems. We didn't get really bad at doing our jobs between 2019 and 2023. The other thing that has exploded has been the downgrading of property crime cases to misdemeanors. If you conceive of this system, what you end up with is a discovery burden that I'll describe in a moment that is very hard to meet. So we're never going to miss the discovery compliance on a murder or a shooting or a case where somebody shot a gun at someone else. We're going to fire hose hours and resources at those cases to get them discovery compliant. What that means, though, is the budget of hours to do cases against people who are burglarizing apartment buildings, stealing repeatedly from businesses, selling drugs over and over again in the same spot. Those cases cannot be prosecuted as felonies at the same rates as they could have been pre-discovery reform. And I'm asked constantly, can you show me the one case that's so horrible? There are examples, but by and large, it's the cases that we don't pursue that have been the victims of discovery reform. So on the stats, the misdemeanor numbers are worse. That percentage is like 68% of dismissals are for speedy trial now on misdemeanors. It used to be in the high 20s, I think. I don't cover misdemeanor court, so I don't know it as well. I have it here. Well, I see some head shakes. The numbers from our stat team are 2019, 30-30 dismissals accounted for 20% of all misdemeanor dismissals. In 2023, that was 68%. So the idea that this has not resulted in more case dismissals is not borne out in our data. We can have a numbers-based argument later, but it does stand to reason that if you raise the price of doing every case substantially, and I think you'd all agree that we have raised the price of getting discovery compliant on any case very substantially, there will be more times we don't get discovery compliant. So, you know, I do differ on the price of this. And I think that the same way you could have a very clean slogan that says, a person should know the evidence against him or her before they make a decision on their case. That is impossible to argue with. That is true. It's the only way to have a fair system. And it was not true before this system was passed. It does not mean this system, particularly with all of its general flaws, is the only way to accomplish that. And there are some things built into that slogan that I'd warn you about. I'd also warn you that a pretty slogan can hide some ugly stuff. You could say no one who's been violated by someone should ever have to sit in a room and be questioned by his or her lawyer. That's our system of, you know, trial by jury with the right of the accused to face their accuser. But you can flip that language around to make it kind of ugly as well. The problem in you should see the evidence against you is, what does the evidence against you mean? When it is the video of the crime, that's impossible to argue against. The statement of a detective, of course. The prior statements of the witness, of course. Some things we've had cases dismissed for. We didn't provide the cab receipt we used to get a witness on a domestic violence case to our office. We didn't turn over the remaining battery life on a body-worn camera. We didn't turn over the remaining amount of storage space on a body-worn camera or a report that contains those things. We didn't take the disciplinary history of a police officer who transported a civilian witness from the scene of a crime to the police station and turn over that officer's disciplinary history that was 15 years old to the defense. We redacted the names of civilians who had complained about a police officer 12 years ago in an unrelated case from the disciplinary records we turned over in this case. So yes, it's easy to say, you've got the evidence, you can get the evidence, just turn it over. We never want to hold anything back. The problem is not stuff that we now have that we don't give. It's stuff we can't anticipate we need that we later have held against us. We are spending so much time litigating audit trail logs for Axon body-worn cameras, which is so deep in the weeds, I'm sorry to trouble you with it, but there are 312 fields of metadata Axon's cameras create. We now can't answer ready on a domestic violence case until we have gotten all 312 of those fields, which include, you know, relatively trivial things like battery life, to the defense. One of the reasons you couldn't simply integrate NYPD with us is that no one anticipated that the law would be interpreted to say that the disciplinary history of every officer stretching back to the beginning of his or her career is a prerequisite to stopping the speedy trial clock. It's not a law that brought us into the modern age. This is an outlier. There is no jurisdiction that ties speedy trial time to discovery. We are not joining the civilized world. We are in completely uncharted territory. And what results is dismissals of cases for evidence that does not help someone defend. So I don't want to give you my whole presentation you've heard before. I had the opportunity to address you and Legal Aid did not. And I think it's good to have both perspectives here. I do want to respond, even though we're close to 9 o'clock at this point, to a couple things though. It's absolutely true that the 20 days and 35 days in the statute are not, they don't have the same teeth as the 30-30 laws. They are what the law says. So when you're asked, you know, if I'm asked to summarize the law, the provisions of the law say you got 20 days, it's not enforceable. That's completely correct. The numbers that matter are 90 days and 180 days. We usually meet the 180-day standard on felony cases that we still choose to bring. We bring far fewer of them and far fewer than we'd like to because of the resource burden of doing them. Misdemeanor court is now fundamentally broken. Most misdemeanor cases cannot survive a challenge to a certificate of compliance. And that sounds trivial, you know, they're just misdemeanors, but I've had conversations with a father of someone who had their daughter masturbated in front of on the subway. We missed discovery compliance on that case through documents we didn't get. We've had domestic violence cases that end routinely without orders of protection for someone who's been abused, because one of the hardest things to actually get is in a domestic violence case, right? The police department does what's called follow-up home visits. So what they'll do is they'll respond to the day of the arrest, take someone into custody, but they're worried about the person down the line. So they go and they do a visit. That's not linked to an arrest. It's not linked to a criminal case. Our courts have found, probably defensively, I think, that those home visits are potentially evidence in the criminal case. So we then have to track down these home visits that occur 2 weeks after, 4 weeks after, 8 weeks after the case by officers who are not related to that initial case. It's not as easy as just, you've got the file, now give them the file. We would love to do that. It's this enormous burden to gather things we are unaware of at pain of dismissal, not at pain of go get it later. not at pain of you can't use it later, but at pain of if you miss one of these things, your case is dismissed. The Bay case, which has been helpful, certainly in Supreme Court. That's the case that imposed the no perfect prosecutor standard. Some of our judges, and to my colleague's point that this does not only operate in one jurisdiction, it's everywhere. There are criminal court judges, there are Supreme Court judges who have said the Bay decision covers Article 245 and that 3030 says what it says. And we haven't reached that analysis. I don't need to reach as far as Bay because the perfect prosecutor standard applies to remedies under one statute and not the other. The reason I know this matters to the defense bar is we propose moving the fix that we all talked about from 2022 from section 245, where it lives and doesn't help, to section 3030, where it would help. The language says no adverse consequences shall flow to the prosecutor from a failure to do a certain number of things. When we proposed moving that language from one section to another, we got an enormous amount of pushback. Because the same way the prior regime was a trial readiness, not speedy trial regime, this law, and I have to say I don't blame anybody for it, it is a case dismissal machine. This is not a sunlight law. This law was aimed at, in my view, getting cases dismissed at as high a clip as possible. It has succeeded. What I would say about substantial compliance is, as proposed, the three prongs of it we set out were, you need to provide everything needed to prove a prima facie, not prima facie, our case at trial. That would include Rosario material, that would include statements of witnesses. Everything the Constitution compels and everything we actually have. That's not discretionary. That is, you still live under the 3030 dismissal regime we now have if you don't meet that standard. That was the proposal. Substantial compliance is governed by the current proposal. If you don't meet that bar, your case is dismissed. What it says is if I can meet that bar and give you everything I have that I would need to go to trial and that the Constitution compels, I can stop the speedy trial clock and we can litigate everything else beyond that with a prejudice standard. There is no prejudice standard for failing to meet substantial compliance. That is dismissal. That would be, by the way, the most progressive discovery regime in the country, if adopted, aside from the one that we currently have. So again, I don't want to focus on defending the old law. It was not defensible. I don't think the current one is either. You know, you've heard my spiel on this before. I can answer questions if they're responsive to individual concerns. But where I think we've landed is that we had a horrible law that was too skewed in one direction. We have replaced it with a horrible law that is too skewed in the other direction. It won't be lasting. The pendulum will swing. I'd argue you're seeing some parts of that already happening, unfortunately. And I think we need to find a place that is a sustainable and fair policy to implement before you end up with, you know, revisions to this or the bail laws that take us back further than any of us want to go. I'll tell you, living in this world, our prosecutors get material earlier. We make better decisions quicker. We get people into programming in an amount of time that makes sense. We suss out weaknesses in cases. I don't want to go back to a place where we are not compelled to go get evidence. I don't want to keep living in a place where if I redacted the name of somebody who complained about a cop in 2006, my victim doesn't get an order of protection. I'd also say, you know, there have been fewer impacts on victim safety and witness safety than any of us anticipated. I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. I'll give you another one to throw against me. In 2012, when the Floyd case was decided about stop and frisk, many of my colleagues thought the world was going to end. We got 6 years of improving public safety. We should all be very careful about what we're certain about. We were very certain witnesses would be devastated by this law. I have met those people. I can give you those anecdotes. Making policy by anecdote is a bad idea. I know a 15-year-old who still goes to bed and wets the bed multiple times per week because his robber got his phone number through the discovery statute and calls him repeatedly. There are those stories. Any system's going to have it. The prior system had bad anecdotes, many more of them. This one will have plenty. The bigger effect is that witnesses just don't talk to us at the same rate. It's not the immediate harm. It is, I used to say to people, this was my speech, if you testify in the grand jury, no one will know that happens unless and until this goes to trial, and we have control over when and if that happens. I can't make that promise anymore. When a witness comes forward and says, I don't know if I want to talk to you, what happens? I have to say, unless I win a protective order motion in front of a judge where I can't guarantee that, your name and quote unquote adequate contact information, which actually is not as scary as it sounds, it's not your address, needs to be turned over. And you know, we are lucky enough in Manhattan to use a platform that dummies up phone numbers so the calls still come through. You can turn them off or not. If you call someone back, your number gets revealed. So there are flaws in the WITCOM system that are not perfect, But we have, the luck to have that kind of technology. But not being able to guarantee somebody the anonymity that we used to be has changed our relationship with witnesses. We bend over backwards to not scare those folks. And there's not a great rationale for privileging some victims of crimes over others. If someone holds a gun to your temple, we have to give your adequate contact information. If you call 911, we don't. I don't know a world in which that's a terribly sensible policy decision to make. We want to encourage people to come forward and call 911, but if we are scared enough to not give out the contact information of sex crimes victims, I don't know why we don't do the same when somebody has their home invaded by people who are just there to steal and hurt them. So there's some acknowledgement that certain classes of crime victims have been protected in ways that others are not, that I'd love to see addressed. But despite the animation that we get on this as prosecutors, because seeing some of the case dismissals and some of the resource expenditures to chase down this minutia and how it's reshaped the profession is frustrating. I see worse training of lawyers who spend so much time asking, do I have the pre-arraignment Zolpa card? And spending 20 minutes to go get this thing that just says what time a person checked into a courtroom and when they moved on, under pain of case dismissal of not getting that. That's their focus. They spend so little time on what should happen. What's a just result in this case? Is my witness telling me the truth? What more investigation can I do? So much of their early career is this paper chase that when they have more time on more serious matters, I worry about the judgment we're developing on my side of the aisle for sure. The conversations I've had with kind of rising defense lawyers worry me a bit too about the focus on what is the thing I can find that's missing that is my client's golden ticket. And that's, I don't disrespect it. That's the job, to get your client acquitted and to get them help in many cases. We've had great results with the Legal Aid Society and others, but if there's a way to get your client's case dismissed, you have to take it. So if that means finding the one thing that's missing or arguing that a marginal thing should have been provided, it sucks up a ton of oxygen. And that's why I think we need to find a way to say, the goal is, let us get the evidence to someone that is what they need to make a fair decision on their case. But let's not talk about how much battery life was left in the Axon camera before we can certify compliance. And that's kind of the pitch. We are all ears to anybody who has a constructive proposal on how to reduce these burdens. Funding will not do it. Tech will not do it. Because when somebody says there's a home visit by an officer we were unaware of 6 weeks after a DV case, the nice justice system isn't going to help. 16 additional discovery analysts aren't going to help. If that officer doesn't say, I put this in the right place, we're not going to get it. And the NYPD, I'd love to hold them to account too. They've heard me speak at this volume with this level of agitation at them as well. But the flaws on their end of not getting the marginalia around the edges of a case to us should never result in someone not receiving justice on their case and someone being held to account for the wrongdoing. And the things that flow with that, like orders of protection and sex offender registration. So if there are questions, I know it's 9:07 and I hate doing this in a rushed format, and I think it'd be more constructive to do it with the ability to go back and forth a little bit, even though it's an issue that stirs a lot of passion, but I am mindful that we're now, 40 something minutes past where we're supposed to be.
That's okay. This is an extremely important topic, and we want to, for lack of a better term, do our due diligence with this topic. Do we have any questions?
I have two questions.
Jose, go ahead.
Andrew, same question I actually go Aid, 2019, were you aware if prosecutors were involved in those reforms? Because they seem to be, we went from like one extreme, which was very favorable to prosecutors, to another extreme, which were very favorable to defense attorneys, from at least from the description. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, but just from what I'm reading.
I know, I don't want to say more than I know, right? I was not in that room. I know I've been told by people who have a vested interest in saying this, that prosecutors were not in the room where it happened, so to speak. I'm not sure that those people know what they're talking about. I know that our office was supportive of discovery reform as a principle, on the principle that someone should not make decisions on their case without knowing the evidence against them. We stood by that then, we stand by it now. I have a hard time imagining that a practicing prosecutor looked at the specifics of this statute and didn't light their hair on fire, but I don't know that as a fact. I was not in that room.
Okay, and following up to my second, that was very fair. To my second question, what is the timing? I know that this is going, I want the community board to be aware, like, this is a state issue. You are lobbying the state for these changes. It's a state law. I know that I want to know what the timing is, because obviously, as you see, it's a very tense situation. This is something that affects our community or affects our, we want to make sure that everyone can make a very make their decision wholeheartedly without feeling like they've affected someone's freedom. At the same time, justice is important, because the same way that our community wants, their members to be free, we also want anyone who's doing violent crimes, anyone who is affecting our community in a negative way to be in prison, because we don't want them to continue to do the same thing, right? It's like the same side of the same coin. So what is it, the current, because I know the state first, they go through budget and then they go through their statute. I would like to know where you are in that situation in terms of those lobbying efforts and what the timing is, because we obviously need to give you an answer. We've been told that you came in last, very early in the year, and here we are, but we are where we are, and I'd just like to know that so that we can go back to the full community board and hash this out.
I'm not the legislative affairs guy. If you sent me an email, I can give you a timetable. My sense is that this will be in the governor's budget and it will happen, or it will not be in the governor's budget and it will not happen. I don't think this moves forward as a standalone bill. I think there will be a decision made that this is something that, legislators can vote for in an omnibus budget or not. So, insofar as you're aware of what the budget process looks like, I think it's relatively soon. And Amanda or Callie, if you know, it may be January. It feels like it's a winter event, but I'm not the guy to ask that, frankly. They asked me for my input on what it should look like, but how to approach the legislature, I guess I'm not the diplomat that does that part.
I can quickly give you the timeline.
Andrew, just a second, Amanda. Andrew, how has the response been in other community boards? And
I mean, it varies. It varies a lot. I think there was one in the 6th precinct where we worried for the physical safety of the elected legislators who were there. I think that was a little bit of a higher volume reaction than might have been called for. I think it was Community Board 6, where they were, incredulous at some of the changes. But we have intergovernmental people who know this stuff better than I do. I really am the kind of practicing lawyer here for the ins and outs of how this, in my view, works. I can't give you the politics of it as well as some others might be able to.
okay, and you said that you think that the timetable is January, correct?
No, but I think Amanda knows this better than I do, so she should probably just answer it.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, fine, thank you. Amanda?
Sure, yeah. I finished my last case of last month, so I can no longer claim to be a practicing lawyer. I'm a policy wonk. The state of the state will be given by Governor Hochul on the 8th. I'm sorry, that's when session starts on the 13th, and then her budget is due a couple weeks later. And the budget must pass by April 1st, but that's kind of a farce because if you've paid attention the last couple years, and I think any other year, it usually passes about a month later. And so the budget is a very opaque process. So I think it's important to note that there is no standalone bill for this. This has been tried to be adopted through the budget every time, which used to be referred to as 3 men in a room. Of course, it's now 2 women and a man. But proposals, the Senate and Assembly get to I guess counters, kind of an adversarial way to put it, but put their own budgets together in response to the executive budget. And the hearings always happen in February. So this topic is often discussed by the DA's Association of the State of New York and by individual DAs, along with defense attorneys in those February. And then the doors kind of close in March and they start negotiating among themselves, trying to get to that April 1st deadline. It's been about a month late the last 2 years.
The reason I'm asking is that it seems that this is such an important topic, and I don't want to just jump into it for full board where people might not have enough time to really look at everything. And so I'm just wondering if we could hold off on it for full board until January, or to vote on it tonight and then have in a week, in a few days, and make sure that everyone does their reading of all the information to vote on it in a week or so. And so that's, I'm trying to just get a better timeline on when we should make this forward-moving vote. Does anyone here have any questions?
I think we should vote on it tonight. I think everybody
That's
in
my
the,
question.
that's, I mean, you just raised, you know, I don't know if I'm giving my input.
Both hand raised, and Kenneth and Xavier have their hand
Yeah,
raised, so.
everybody was welcome to come to this meeting and hear about it.
Mhm.
If people don't have the information, that's, you know, that's on them.
Mhm. And Xavier?
Derek has hands raised first, and then Kenneth and Xavier.
There.
Hello, Derek Stampone, Committee Board 11 member. One thing that came up was how this is a law that affects the entire state. And I think it's mostly the case that prosecutors in like upstate New York counties are sort of not experiencing as much like adversarial interactions with judges. They seem a little bit more likely perhaps to give prosecutors the benefit of the doubt and maybe not rule against them as aggressively on failing to meet the compliance requirements. And so my question is, like, given that there are disparities in how this is happening around the state, there's only been the one appellate court decision sort of giving more guidance around this issue. What would you say to someone saying it's like premature to go and change this law at this time and to not give the law more time to sort of play out and be adjudicated and have appellate courts opine on the issue and just give it more time to see what happened, especially given that the law went into place, you know, in 2020 and sort of during that time frame. So again, the question is, what would you say to people saying it's a little too early to make these changes now and to not let it play out for longer?
There's two questions there, right? There's the differential between upstate and the city, which I think I'll field first. I think that's why we're mindful that there has to be some enforceable provision of this. You know, substantial compliance can't be a phrase that doesn't have teeth. That's why we have, you know, in the Manhattan DA's office, we've sketched out that three-prong, you know, present your case at trial, open file, plus everything required under the Constitution. There are other boroughs that have come up with different ways to kind of skin that where is the floor issue. But I think the current statute has a good mechanism in saying there's an amount of discovery that is critical that simply has to get to somebody before we're, you know, prepared to accept this as a fundamentally fair proceeding. Where I differ with, you know, the defense bar on this is that that includes every last shred of documentation that could conceivably relate to a case before we can stop the speedy trial clock. We can litigate all the extraneous stuff later. Let's get to the heart of the matter. So I think that tries to speak on behalf of all 63 counties to say there's nowhere in this system where less than this represents discovery that stops the speedy trial clock. I think it's important to keep that. We didn't have it before this law. I think that's a good structure. So I don't think we should throw out good improvements. At the same time, it took 4 years to get a case to the state Supreme Court. And that's only because a prosecutor made an incredibly bad decision to appeal it. The thing they didn't disclose in Bay was a 911 call. The prosecutor said, I didn't get the 911. They had the 911 call. You always have the 911 call. And the prosecutor lost it in a weird appellate route on a minor misdemeanor case. You have a direct appeal to the Court of Appeals in some, you know, they did that. It was a stupid case to appeal. Thankfully, one got there. But we haven't gotten a sophisticated case past most of the appellate departments who can't agree with one another. And I don't think there's another case that's headed there all that quickly, except for one that's going to deal very narrowly with disciplinary material, which is a huge issue, but it's going to deal with section 2K4 of a statute that goes through at least you, and I think further. So, you know, is you the last one? Electronic evidence? Okay, so yeah, you used late in the game anyway, maybe it's the last one. So yeah, we have a system that where getting meaningful answers from the appellate courts is going to take the better part of 10 to 12 years. We know what many of the problems look like now. And I think, you know, despite having a bird in the hand that the defense bar really doesn't want to give up, there are reasonable ways to not go back to the old system, but to trim the sails on where we are that restore the ability of the system to function.
Thank you. Kenneth, next. Kenneth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Kenneth here, community board member, former member of this committee. It's good to see everybody again. I have a question for Mr. Warshauer. So one thing that we've often talked about at length in committee is gun violence, youth gun violence, but especially gun violence, some of the most serious cases. And so I think this is the first time I'm hearing that the 30/30 dismissal rate for felonies is 48%. And so if you do have that information, if you could share that with the board, we'd love to see that later.
Yes, stop
Yeah,
there for 1 second. No,
sorry.
of felonies that are dismissed, 48% of dismissals are for 30/30.
Yeah, regardless.
That is up from 21%.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea.
21% of our felony, yes, the reasons felonies got dismissed have changed dramatically. And we didn't get substantially worse at doing these cases. So that is the part that I isolate and say we have been able to bring fewer felony cases because it's what the resource constraints. They are more serious when we bring them, and more often when we have to dismiss them, it's because we can't meet speedy trial time. We are not dismissing 48% of felonies. We're downgrading nearly that many in the property crime world, which we didn't used to do. But that is not a dismissal rate.
Understood. Okay, thank you. That's a helpful clarification. I guess that brings us to my next point. So we care a lot about gun violence in our community. I just want to be very clear. It sounds like from some of your commentary earlier today, those are cases where the DA's office does pour resources. So I just want to be very clear. We're not seeing a rash of dismissals for these sorts of felony gun cases because of the discovery reforms, and that the most serious cases are getting the treatment that they deserve. Is that correct?
I know of two, Kenneth, of two shootings that we had to dismiss on discovery grounds. They're cases where I wasn't terribly happy with the efforts that we made, to be totally blunt. You know, the statute was tough. We could have done better. But by and large, you know, we have defended that work by just, you know, hosing resources. When you see somebody who has stolen from the same store 16 times in the last 4 months, and we've never charged them with a felony, although we could have, that's where this is playing out. We know we're not going to get discovery compliant on those cases. So we're punting them into misdemeanor court and hoping it just kind of goes away. So the intentional choice was made. We're going to always do the higher end work or the more violent work correctly. And where we've been less effective is down the severity scale. So I wouldn't stand here credibly in front of you and say this is causing gun violence. That's not a fair argument to make.
Sure, and I just want to make sure, because those are some of the serious cases that we do really care about. And we've discussed at length at committee, at full board. And I just want to make sure that there isn't some sort of causal link there. But thank you for that. That's really helpful.
I don't think so. I mean, we can have a longer conversation about it, but in the top 10 problems with gun violence in Manhattan, I wouldn't list discovery there. I would list, you know, the experience level of our attorneys, as it happened in legal aid as well. You know, we had a huge amount of attrition. We now have people who were born in the late 90s prosecuting some of those cases. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is kind of the world that we live in. And I'm sure the defense bar feels the same way, that the profession's been, you know, hollowed out a little bit because of some of the ugliness in this practice and post-COVID, et cetera. So no, but it's not a discovery driven problem for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Xavier, you have the floor.
Thank you, everyone. Xavier here. I'm the chair of Community Board 11. I'm very pleased to see a collegial and respectful conversation and dialogue. Sorry, like many of us, family guy, but I'm not Peter. So that's a little joke to diffuse the room. Look, I work in film production. I used to be in computer science. I'm very logic oriented. I had too many people say, "Don't be an attorney. You won't make a lot of money." In my industry, you can have it fast and cheap, but not good. You can have it fast and good, but not cheap. So in saying that, I know we've had a lot of attrition, a lot of resources. I'm gonna ask, you know, I think they're in your division, Andy, respectfully, how many ADAs do you have?
About 300.
300. How many would you need with the current burdens to comply with this version of discovery?
That's interesting, Xavier. We tried to do a back of the napkin on this to say if we wanted to go back to downgrading cases from felonies to misdemeanors at the same rate as we did in like 2021, which is not fair because that was before Alvin Bragg took office, right? So there's a degree to which this is a hard thing to answer. If you wanted to, that number's around 80 or 90. But that ignores the fact that we have different policies now. So, you know, it's a big number. It's not an impossible number. You'd need a lot outside of us, though. You'd need more defense attorneys. You'd need more TPAs and analysts. You'd need more judges, more court attorneys. You know, you scale us up by 25%. You've got to scale the whole rest of the system. So it's a big, you know, it would be a big resource suck.
Okay, so just so I'm clear. So again, treat me like I'm 5. Again, You have about 300 ADAs within your division. And
Yep.
would you say to be compliant and paper chasing, you would need what, 4 times that amount?
No, an additional 80 or 90 was my back.
80 or 90?
I'm sure our data
Back
people
up.
do a better job with this, but that again
Okay.
proves the decision-making that existed before Alvin Bragg took office, which is a counterfactual that's not fair.
Right, right. And I'm not trying to, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but respectfully, I just,
Yep.
if you were to go back to the same rate of 2019 with the prosecutions and not pleading down or sending to
Yeah, it's a
misdemeanor.
different crime environment. Gun violence was at historic
Mm,
lows in 2018 and 19. It's just a hard comparison to make. But
mhm.
it's somewhere on the order of magnitude of scaling up the system by 25%.
Okay, and then the starting salary of an ADA in New York County.
I believe it just went over $72,000 a year.
Okay,
It's in the
okay.
70s. I don't, didn't anticipate that question. It's much better than it used to be.
Okay, okay. And then so the appropriations that was given was about 10 million recently, right? And some of that got put into technology and whatnot. So, but what I'm hearing from you, if I'm correct, is you'd have to scale up on both sides to make sure
And
everyone's
of
able to
course,
play ball.
on all these separate actors. I mean, there are better ways to solve that problem to me. Even if you didn't change the discovery law, I think there are better ways to come at that. The money that's been spent is not sufficient for it. In my prior life, I was a systems integration guy at Ernst & Young.
Mhm.
What the discovery law ordered was the systems integration of the 36,000 person NYPD and 6 prosecutors' offices. That's a 9-figure job. And for that kind of money, to your point, Xavier, you could get the right results. But we spent 0. And I think that does speak to the care that was paid at the implementation of this law to how it was going to impact the system.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I have one question for Amanda. You mentioned that in 2019, you knew or were in the room, correct? And that you knew that you had a prosecutor. What county was that prosecutor from?
I want to just zoom out a little bit. The way that laws become legislation, there isn't a room. There are stakeholder meetings. So the lawmakers were talking to DASNY, the District Attorneys Association of New York, which represents all the counties, right? So that's the one org, and they represent all the counties.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that for the committee. Sorry not to interrupt again, just
Mm.
because I want to be considerate to everyone, so we don't have more kids escaping bedtime. The which attorneys in which counties were most intimately involved during that?
I don't know because what they do is they don't. I wasn't in all the rooms as no one was the conversations are siloed. So they talk to the prosecutors, the lawmakers talk to the prosecutors, the governor's team talk to the prosecutors, the governor's team talk to the DAs, the governor's team talk to the representatives from police departments. So I can't tell you more than that because they silo us, right? That 2022 moment was actually really unique because we were we want to problem solve this, let's get together. And I'll point out that was a downstate, that was a city coming together to
Thank you, man. I was referring to 2019, not,
yeah,
yeah.
silos.
So,
So all those
yeah.
meetings happen over a series of years and happen always same sides are meeting with same sides.
Okay. Thank you for relaying that. Um, Michelle, Chair, I see back. Thank you for the time, and everyone in the room. Thank you for being here for a respectful conversation.
Thank you. So we have a decision to make. We have heard from both the Legal Aid Society and from Danny. We have read the materials, I hope. I prompted everyone, this is homework from both sides. I myself made sure that both the Legal Aid Society and Danny had all of the information so that they both had all of the discovery from each other, which is important to actually practice what we are going to be voting on either now or the following month. I want to take a look to see, do we all want to think about this now and to vote on this now? Or do we want to think about this and vote on it in January? I'm seeing one nod. I know yours.
I would say think about it before the January.
That's a second.
I agree. In January should be.
Okay, that's a third.
Yeah, I can give a reason.
think that.
You don't need to give a reason.
I won't.
Okay, go ahead.
I just think that this presentation should be made available to the board.
Well, it's definitely gonna be made available to the board.
I don't know how soon it can be made. I don't know if everyone has enough time to actually like sit down and digest it. We did invite them all to come here today, or at least be online. Give them the benefit of the doubt, give them another month, because it does seem like, we have until February to give a decision. And next month will probably be the most ideal, just for everyone to be up to date, just.
Yeah.
Typically in this committee, we've always taken the time of having a presentation, voting the following month, primarily because you're digesting. And it takes time. Even watching this takes time. Our full board meeting is Tuesday, right? So counting that you don't do anything on the weekends, we have 2 days, basically. We include Tuesday, 3. Not counting your personal time or everything else. So typically, we know that a lot of this will be in February. We know that January, it's very like ramp up, they're ramping up, and this is a state issue. But I do think that it has to be a very hard, like, stop, like, we can't do this again on this thing. We have good reason to do this, because we didn't have legal aid before. At the same time, we voted in favor of this last month, and that could go either way, depending on how it goes. But I do think that the community board and the community as a whole should be aware of everything we're doing, because it does have tremendous ramifications. Not just here, but throughout the state. As you heard, if we have unlimited funding, this wouldn't be an issue. But we do not have unlimited funding. If you see all the garbage cans full in the streets and all the other monumental problem that we have all over our community and all over the city, we know that unlimited funding is not an option. If anything, every year funding is cut more and more. So I would be also in favor of doing that as well, to give everyone these to, spend their holidays tranquil, but come in with a clear conscience and vote according to how you want to vote.
I personally, it takes time to get all the information out to everyone, and I'm gotta do your homework, and I need it. It's because we want to come in with a mindset of, I'm not gonna just brush over it, but I want you to, I don't want to see those blank looks that I saw at last full board. I was very angry, to put it lightly, when I saw blank looks, because we put a lot of effort into what we do. And I don't like to have people not do the same when it comes to something that's so important in our community. Public safety is an extremely important thing. Our safety, our family safety is important. So I do not take this lightly, and contacting Legal Aid Society and Danny to give us this conversation was important. And I do thank y'all for coming and being here. And Xavier, your hand is still up, or is that a new hand?
Don's hand started having raised first, and then
Yeah, thank you. Dawn had her hand up first, and then I'll speak as we conclude the evening. Thank you.
Okay, and so that is where I'm coming from. So I too would want to postpone for the following month, because it's really Tuesday too close for everyone to actually look at it, read all this information again, because they didn't have all this information. They only had the video and this. There's a whole much more. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go to Dawn, had her hand up first.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
My hand was,
Dawn?
thank you so much, Chair. My hand was only up to possibly motion to postpone and so when you first said it, I just put my hand up in agreement. So.
Okay.
I don't need to make a motion though, right? I think we're all looking at
Don't need
taking
to make
the,
a motion. I'm just looking at people how they lie.
okay, well, if you need a motion, I will be here. I'm putting my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Xavier? Do you want to go last after?
Yeah, I can go last. It's fine. I just, yeah.
Christina?
Yeah, well, the reason I would like to wait until January to do this is because I was trying to take the minutes and I had to actually stop because I was trying to process and digest what they were saying. But I also spoke to Isaac after the last full board meeting, and he had some really good points. And for me, I would like to do a little more research on this before I can give an honest vote. So I would appreciate waiting until January.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, and you have his points?
I have what?
Do you have the points?
They send it to us.
You have Isaac's points, right?
No, I didn't get it,
Okay,
but I have his number, so I'm gonna call him because he's gonna send it to
I'll
me.
send it to you, I'll send it to all.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Sage?
Yeah, and regardless, I would vote present, not voting. But it's my feeling, I don't think I have to give a reason.
I'm kidding.
I mean, this is a serious issue.
I know, but we're tired, so.
And so I just think, like, a lot of people were animated about this last month at full board. Some people, gave blank stares, but I feel like people are expecting us to come back, on Tuesday and say like, this is sort of, we took this back to committee, which the board voted on. We heard from the same people we've heard, legal aid wasn't there before, but essentially like the same people we heard from earlier this year. And we thought about it again. We did our homework, the committee, in preparation for this meeting. And we reached the decision that we reached, not, punting it to next month when, it's not gonna be top of mind for folks anymore. And I think the validity of the full board decision rests on people's familiarity with the issues that were discussed last month and this month. I think if we wait 2 months from, the meeting that happened last month, people are gonna be like, what is this again? I wasn't thinking about this for the whole month of January, the whole month of December. I think to really get a feel of what the community feels, that we're gonna have to feed off of what we did last month. Otherwise, it's just like another random blank stare, didn't read this vote.
Thank you.
Xavier.
Pardon? Xavier.
So
Xavier.
I appreciate the perspective and I do think it's important for everyone to take this seriously. The amount of research, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I hire the attorneys and I know how to get my money's worth out of them. So I would say in this case, and I do value what you said, Sage, but I think at this point I would, and the committee can choose what the committee is going to choose to do. However, I think it would be more prudent for these questions to be raised and sent to both parties so there could be a response in writing. And I'm sure they'd be pleased to provide a response. However, I think the better win for all of us as a city and a state is to meet in the middle and see where the deficits truly are and how we merge those together, make ends meet, which is what the rest of America is trying to do right now. And I would say this as someone who's gone across these 50 great states most recently this fall, that where we see deficits, which both parties have shared, where can we find funding? Where can we find ways to make ends meet? And that, I think those common inroads will help us find a final solution. But it all boils down to math as far as I'm concerned. And if the math's not there, as my kids say, the math isn't mathing, Dad, then how do we bridge that gap? And that's what I would implore with these type of societal issues. So again, I applaud everyone for a very collegial discourse and look forward to furthering this. And happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays. Okay, so should we make a motion to?
You don't have to make a motion. I think we did the
I
majority
think
already.
Jules' hand is up, by the way, just as an FYI, because she put a different background this time, so it doesn't blend in. So I'm so tuned into her.
Jill Jones, you have the floor.
If if everyone's giving their opinion, I wrote in the chat that I'm prepared to vote now. Just wanted to put that out there, so. That was it.
Okay, so that's two. Thank you.
Everybody else is voting tonight?
All right, so we're
Made a
all.
good point, made a good point, but
You made a good point, but
I think.
I think Tuesday is really close for some people to read the newer information. They have the older information, but they don't have the newer information, and as well as we have the Legal Aid Society information that we did not have previously to digest.
I think if people aren't gonna do it in the next week, they're not gonna do it at all.
Well, we'll see.
Okay, we'll see. So we will table this until January so that we'll decipher the information to full board. Thank you. And with that, new business, none, good, let's go. Roll call, please.
Jose Alvarado. Here. Carlos Diaz.
Here.
Pascal Hano.
Here.
Wanda Hopkins.
Here.
Tina Johnson. Here. Jewel Jones.
Here.
Sage Mason.
Here.
Lottie Perez absent. Valerie Ponte absent. Don Sanders.
Yep, here.
Michelle Lozar Clement.
Present.
Absent.
Okay, thank you. Now we are adjourning at the time of 9:40.
I always expect you.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Hey,
Happy
go.
holidays.
So it doesn't make a difference to me if it's like